David Gordon Green's Halloween trilogy held promise in the realm of modern horror cinema, as it aimed to resurrect a legend and redefine the terror of Michael Myers for a new generation. As ambitious an endeavor as it was to offer a compelling reimagining of the slasher legend, while at the same time connecting back to the original film exclusively, it's disheartening to admit that not all good things come in threes. Especially when it comes to the ill-fated third and final chapter of this new trilogy, Halloween Ends. Despite the individual merits of Halloween Ends, it ultimately disappoints as a conclusion to the trilogy. While the film can be appreciated as a decent narrative in isolation, it fails to deliver as a fitting culmination to the trilogy, leaving viewers questioning the execution and pondering why the devil truly lies in the details. Today, we will delve deeper into the reasons behind the dissatisfaction with Halloween Ends as the conclusion to David Gordon Green's Halloween trilogy. In Halloween Kills, the second act of the trilogy, the stakes were set high, and the fear that permeated the narrative was palpable. The town of Haddonfield stood united, driven by a shared determination to end the reign of the boogeyman, once and for all. The film built up the tension and excitement, promising a finale that would surpass all expectations. However, it is regrettable that Halloween Ends failed to capitalize on this momentum. As the concluding chapter, it barely acknowledged the setup established at the end of Halloween Kills, leaving many Halloween fans disappointed and yearning for the epic showdown we had anticipated and were supposedly promised during those final few moments of Halloween Kills. The potential for a united Haddonfield, facing the embodiment of their deepest fears, was left largely unexplored in Halloween Ends, leaving a sense of unfulfilled promise in the air. Halloween Ends presents us with a disjointed narrative that appears detached from its predecessors. One of the key issues lies in the inconsistencies in character arcs. Over the course of the two previous films, and in particular, Halloween Kills, characters were lovingly crafted, with their motivations and established traits carefully developed. However, in Halloween Ends, these same characters suddenly make choices that contradict their established personalities and ideals, without any substantial narrative reasoning besides, everyone is scarred after the events of Kills, which is nothing short of lazy at best. Beyond that, the film is riddled with other incongruities and discrepancies, as characters who had been painstakingly nurtured and developed over two films veer off their set paths in a manner that defies their established arcs. This departure from previously established character development leaves us perplexed and creates an unwelcome detachment from the overall story. Let's consider the character of Laurie Strode as a prime example. In the 2018 film and its sequel, she undergoes a significant transformation, evolving from a traumatized survivor to a resolute protector, and a matriarch who leads the town's defense against Michael Myers. However, in Halloween Ends, her character takes an unexpected turn. Surprisingly, Laurie becomes strangely passive, relinquishing her role as the protective hunter. This retreat to the sidelines is an unsettling departure from her previously assertive and determined persona, leaving viewers scratching their heads by this uncharacteristic shift in her character's arc, as her assertive role in the previous films was a defining aspect of her character and the films themselves. But Laurie aside, Significant missteps in character development extend to Michael Myers as well, diminishing his impact greatly compared to that of the previous installments. The film shifts Michael's character from an enigmatic and unstoppable force of evil to a more minimized and less terrifying antagonist, robbing the narrative of the eerie tension that once defined it. Furthermore, the attempt to humanize Michael in Halloween Ends weakens his relentless and menacing nature, diminishing the terror he once inspired. These choices undermine the impact of his character and dilute the sense of dread carefully built throughout the trilogy up to this point. Moreover, the culmination of the Michael Myers saga falls short of expectations, lacking the struggle and desperation implied in Halloween Kills. The resolution feels anticlimactic, with Michael's defeat appearing too effortless, contradicting the dread-laden buildup of the previous films. As a result, the overwhelming sense of anticipation is destroyed, leaving the audience dissatisfied and questioning the significance of the saga's resolution. The missteps in character development and the lackluster culmination leave a lingering disappointment in Halloween Ends as the concluding chapter of the trilogy. Had Halloween Ends been positioned as a fourth entry taking place after Michael's demise, it had the potential to be a captivating exploration of Haddonfield's post-Myers world. Such a narrative could have delved into the psychological aftermath, examining the effects on the town's populace, the lingering trauma, and the chilling legacy left behind long after his death. It would have offered a refreshing departure, focusing on the collective guilt and the town's struggle to move forward. However, as the concluding chapter of this trilogy, Halloween Ends disappointingly fails to deliver the emotional catharsis and narrative cohesion we anticipated. The film is plagued by continuity errors, out-of-character decisions, and a lackluster confrontation, all contributing to a disjointed ending. The missed opportunity to fully explore the aftermath of Michael's reign of terror and delve into the psychological ramifications leaves us with a sense of unfulfilled potential. Instead, Halloween Ends concludes the trilogy on a very lackluster note, leaving viewers longing for not just the epic town-wide showdown we were presumably promised by the conclusion of Halloween Kills, but also the exploration of the post-Myers world that could have provided a different and more impactful epilogue compared to the very brief scene we did get following Myers' visit to the industrial shredder. David Gordon Green's Halloween trilogy began with a semi-triumphant return as far as many Halloween fans were concerned, building anticipation for its sequel, Halloween Kills, which is in and of itself a masterpiece of horror, and what I personally consider to not only be the best of the trilogy by far, but one of the best Halloween films of the entire franchise, with the ending of Halloween Kills seemingly promising us a thrilling and action-packed climax. However, Halloween Ends disappointingly neglects its own foundations and forsakes the narrative threads it had carefully woven throughout the series. As a result, it feels less like a satisfying conclusion and more like an addendum that leaves us longing for the finale that could have been. Despite the promising start and engaging build-up of Green's trilogy, it unfortunately fumbles at the finish line by not staying true to its own groundwork and betraying the narrative threads it established. Halloween Ends feels like an afterthought, an appendage that leaves us yearning for the fulfilling finale we were promised but never given. The lack of emotional catharsis in the last installment further compounds this disappointment. Halloween Ends falls short of delivering on its potential, leaving fans with an unquenched desire for the closure that the trilogy failed to provide. In conclusion, Halloween Ends would have served better as a potential fourth entry rather than the trilogy's concluding chapter, with the character of Corey Cunningham potentially taking on a Roy Burns-esque role, where he perhaps finds Michael Myers' mask, and then proceeds to begin his killing spree after Myers is already dead and gone. It could have been an aftermath narrative, exploring the post-Michael Myers chapter of Haddonfield. And regarding Michael Myers himself, the haunting words of Dr. Loomis, "I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil," still resonates with us today. And we wish Halloween Ends had remembered that. Perhaps it would have delivered a more impactful and resonant finale. In 1991, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare promised audiences an epic conclusion to the iconic Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. In 3D no less, with audiences being promised a fitting and very final death for Freddy Krueger himself. Yet, instead of the expansive swan song the franchise absolutely deserved, what we got was a lackluster carnival of comedic horror elements that felt more like a parody of a Freddy movie than an actual Freddy movie. Let's take a look at Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. Firstly, the tone of this so-called Final Nightmare was very problematic. A great horror flick teeters on the knife edge of terror, keeping you in suspense, making you question what lies around every corner, and if there's comedic or quirky aspects thrown into the mix, it should be handled with a sense of balance, much like Jason Lives, or The Lost Boys, or even Scream. Yet, Freddy's Dead tipped this balance heavily, taking on a goofy, cartoony vibe that was very far removed from the original darkness of the first two films of the franchise, and certainly much zanier and much more cartoony than anything seen in parts 3, 4, or 5.
Now be a good little doggy and go fetch!
Freddy Krueger, once a symbol of relentless terror, or at least still in the vein of his original interpretation, was reduced to a caricature of himself in a very major way in Freddy's Dead. His sinister yet funny one-liners and puns we came to know and love from Dream Warriors onward somehow turned into cheap, laughable gags that just feel flat and deflated almost immediately.
Nice hearing from you, Carlos.
The franchise's trademark dark surrealism and hyperkinetic dreamy atmosphere was replaced by 100% slapstick horror, pulling us out of the nightmare entirely and into a farce. To make matters worse, we're introduced to a random daughter, a never-before-mentioned offspring of Freddy's. This edition not only feels like a total break from continuity, but feels like a cheap plot device, shoehorned in to add some sort of personal stakes to Freddy's eventual downfall, not unlike the sister angle of Jason Goes to Hell. It's an unexpected twist, but one that leaves audiences asking, where has she been all this time? And why the hell should we care?
But you let me live!
Only long enough for you to bring me back my daughter.
Your daughter?
The lack of attention to detail extend to Freddy's appearance as well. Robert Englund's makeup is at its most basic in this film. Gone are the intricately grotesque burn scars that made Freddy's visage so memorable, replaced by a more rubbery, simplistic design that seems more like a product of afterthought, when the character's burn makeup should play a pretty significant role in both pre- and active production. Englund's portrayal of Freddy is still magnetic, yet the burn scars that help visually define him are no longer fear-inducing.
Sticks and stones may break my bones, but nothing will ever kill me.
Then there's the issue of the film's 3D gimmick. The final nightmare's dream sequence towards the end of the film, specifically the last 10 minutes or so, employs 3D effects, a gimmick that now looks absurdly dated, crude, and out of place, especially when watched in 2D. These 3D effects not only fail to contribute anything meaningful to the narrative, but also distract the viewer entirely, taking the focus completely away from said narrative and further diluting its impact. The debate over which film has worse 3D, Freddy's Dead or Friday the 13th Part 3, is still up for debate. The next point of contention is the way Freddy is defeated at the end of the final nightmare. We've seen Freddy killed off in every nightmare movie that predates Freddy's Dead, with his death in parts 3, 4, and 5 all seeming very final in their own way, and with each succeeding death seeming more final than the last. But, in the final nightmare, the movie that asserted itself as the conclusion to the entire franchise, his death is somehow less definitive than in previous entries. There's absolutely no sense of finality, and certainly no feeling of genuine closure. It's just another death scene in a long line of Freddy's temporary setbacks, making the promise of a final nightmare feel misleading. Which we know it is, since Freddy is still able to return down the road in Freddy vs. Jason, but again, not a part of the mainline franchise, and therefore, not a part of this mainline problem.
Kids.
Additionally, too many characters survive in this entry. One of the strengths of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise has been the vulnerability of its characters. Nobody is safe in their dreams. Yet, in Freddy's Dead, we see a noticeable increase in the survival rate, another element that takes away from the suspense and terror that defined earlier films, especially when you take into account the death of Nancy Thompson, the heroine of the first film and a huge part of the Dream Warrior's story, who has been dead since Part 3. But in Freddy's Dead, surviving Freddy Krueger has somehow become a much easier feat. Finally, the end line of Freddy's Dead is delivered in a manner that can only be described as cringe-inducing. It attempts to be a punchline, a final declaration of Freddy's demise, yet it falls completely flat, echoing the general sentiment towards this final installment.
Freddy's dead.
But, despite these shortcomings, there are a few redeeming factors. The soundtrack is excellent, the original score is effective, the concept of dream demons is intriguing, tying into the lore of the series in a unique way, flashbacks into Freddy's childhood and married life are compelling, adding a layer of complexity to his character, and most of the cast does do a good job, particularly considering the script they were given. However, these bright spots are not enough to save the film. As a standalone movie, Freddy's Dead might have been an acceptable comedic horror film, but as the conclusion to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, it falls woefully short. It lacks the raw terror, the poignant storytelling, and the haunting ambiance that made the series a juggernaut of 1980s horror. Instead, it feels like one big missed opportunity to give Freddy Krueger the grand finale he so rightfully deserved.
You can't scare me anymore.
Oh, you better speak up. Oh, must be my deaf ear.
Freddy's Dead marks the definitive conclusion of the mainline franchise. Although New Nightmare is a meta-film set outside the established continuity, and Freddy vs. Jason is a crossover event that chronologically occurs after Freddy's Dead, they cannot be classified as true entries within the mainline series. Instead, They serve as spin-off and or crossover ventures. Freddy's Dead has managed to accumulate a significant cult following over the years, very much like the cult following Jason Goes to Hell now enjoys, and in that regard, I am genuinely happy to see that the film has found some kind of footing. There are a ton of people who love this film and absolutely have a blast with it, but in response to those people, including you if you are a Freddy's Dead fanatic, I have to pull a completely unrelated response from John Carpenter.
God bless all of you here, but no thanks.
In my view, The Final Nightmare embodies all of the problems that the Nightmare on Elm Street series was grappling with at that point in time, and I lament the fact that, to this day, it officially remains the final chapter of the principal story. The climax of the Nightmare on Elm Street saga should have been magnificent, profound, and on par with at least Dream Warriors, but amplified in scope and bolstered by a much-needed and well-deserved substantial budget.
Great to be back in business.
Despite the film being around for 32 years now, at least at the time I'm making this video, my perspective on Freddy's Dead has remained unwaveringly negative, which is quite telling considering my transformation from an absolute naysayer of Jason Goes to Hell to an enthusiastic fan decades after its initial 1993 release. The same, unfortunately, cannot be said for Freddy's Dead, because my disdain for that movie still lingers, with the film still failing to appeal to me in any significant manner. I actually got to experience Freddy's Dead when it was first released in theaters way back when, accompanied by my mom, at the insane age of 4.5 years old. Surprisingly enough, even at such a young age, I was already a fan of the Freddy movies up to that point. However, even back in 1991, when The Final Nightmare was unleashed upon cinemas everywhere, I found the film uninteresting and not at all in alignment with the Freddy film I wanted. Even at 4.5 years old, I knew this.
Kids.
And now, well over 30 years later, it seems that my 4-year-old self had accurately predicted my future sentiments about Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare, because even back then, I knew that Freddy's Dead was a bad Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and that this supposed final nightmare was not the ending Freddy Krueger deserved.
Now I'm playing with power.
We're doing a documentary about the Blair Witch.
24 years ago, a unique cinematic venture invited audiences into the depths of uncharted fear. The year was 1999, when two filmmakers set forth on a journey that would forever revolutionize the realm of horror cinema. This chilling project was called The Blair Witch Project, a cinematic horror masterpiece that carved a path for the found footage subgenre, thereby altering the landscape of modern horror films, an impact still vibrating through the genre almost a quarter of a century later.
And they disappeared off the face of the earth.
No! Really?
Okay, it's all right, Ingrid. I'm just telling a scary story, but it's not true.
It's not true.
Do you recall the unpolished footage, the grainy visuals, and the unsteady camera movements? These were not production mistakes, but rather strokes of mad genius by directors Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, who exploited our intrinsic fear of the unknown, manipulating our perceptions and making us question reality with their constrained resources. After all, isn't the unknown that lurks in the shadows the most horrifying thing of all?
Packs are on.
Rocket.
We're ready to go.
We gotta go up to the shack, the shanty.
Yep.
Wow.
The Blair Witch Project may not have been the first found footage horror film ever made, but it certainly thrust the subgenre into the limelight and revolutionized the format in ways no other film had. Suddenly, there was a surge of filmmakers brandishing handheld cameras, each armed with a chilling tale to narrate. The Blair Witch Project was the spark that ignited the flame, setting a trend that would shine through several years later in films like Paranormal Activity, Cloverfield, and Wreck. The unsteady camera wasn't merely a style, it evolved into a character, a silent witness, and a pivotal player in the narrative.
Josh!
Calm down.
How can I go?
Josh!
The Blair Witch Project set itself apart through its innovative approach. Leveraging the budding power of the internet, the filmmakers created a ripple of curiosity about the movie. They wove an engaging myth, the legend of the Blair Witch, and masterfully blurred the line between reality and fiction, shaping an immersive experience in which we, the audience, were more than just passive viewers. We found ourselves participants in a chilling dance that left us questioning the authenticity of the horror we just witnessed.
Okay, here's your motivation. You're lost, you're angry in the woods, and no one here is here to help you. There's a fucking witch and she keeps leaving shit outside your door. There's no one here to help you. She left little trinkets, you fucking took one of them. She ran after us, there's no one here to help you. We walked for 15 hours today. We ended up in the same place. There's no one here to help you. That's your motivation.
Even now, almost 25 years later at the time I'm making this video, the Blair Witch Project continues to resonate within the bloodied chambers of the horror genre. Its enduring legacy, much like the legend of the Blair Witch itself, stands firm, a proud staple of not just the found footage subgenre, but of the horror genre overall. And while there have been countless found footage since the film's release, none have been able to emulate the raw, gut-wrenching fear that the film invoked. Its minimalistic approach, rich with nuance and uncertainty, remains a pillar in the field of psychological horror.
Hurry up! I'm coming! My boots aren't laced! Oh my god, what the fuck is that? What the fuck is that?
We can't overlook the impact it had on viewers either. Who could forget the goosebumps that arose as Heather apologized into the camera, or the impending dread when they spotted the unsettling stick figures suspended in the air from the trees above? These moments have imprinted themselves on the shared consciousness of horror enthusiasts, reminding us that true terror often lies not in what we witness, but in what remains unseen.
It's all full of blood.
In the present day, the world of found footage has grown and evolved. We see it merging with various genres, experimenting with fresh themes, and stepping into realms like virtual reality and beyond. Yet, at its heart, the core principle remains the same, instilling fear through the lens of alleged authenticity. And for pioneering this approach, we owe a debt of gratitude to the original Blair Witch Project.
Holy shit, it's a house.
As we traverse the dense forest of contemporary horror cinema, the legacy of the Blair Witch Project serves as a mighty example of what unsettling visceral terror can truly be, standing as a beacon that illuminates the profound potency of fear and the extraordinary ways it can be provoked. In the vast, decaying wasteland of the zombie subgenre of horror, the year 1985 saw not only the release of George Romero's masterpiece, Day of the Dead, one of the best zombie films ever made, and certainly the best dead film of the franchise, but also the release of another zombie epic that would shake the subgenre to its very core and pretty much revolutionize modern zombies as we knew them. This movie was of course, The Return of the Living Dead, and I think it's time to dig up the grave of this gem and explore its game-changing contribution to the zombie mythos and its enduring legacy. The Return of the Living Dead was not just another zombie film. It was a necrotic needle of innovation, redefining what we understood about the undead. It injected new, terrifying life into these rotten, decaying creatures, transforming them from the slow, shambling monsters seen in earlier films like George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and the aforementioned Day of the Dead, which released just 1 month prior to Return.
How many people you know die with a beautiful, perfect set of choppers in their puss, huh?
Nobody I can think of.
Yeah, no, I think that there's a skeleton farm over in India. Jesus. Come on, kid.
Suddenly, zombies were fast, a chilling concept later adopted in 28 Days Later, World War Z, and notoriously, the fantastic Dawn of the Dead remake in 2004. No longer was safety just a brisk walk away. Now, these ravenous creatures could chase you down, their speed elevating the tension and panic in the audience. And although we had seen running zombies in films before this, such as Nightmare City, Return of the Living Dead was really the first running zombie flick to truly capture the zeitgeist of horror pop culture.
It's all right, my car's still out there, and so's Frank's.
Not anymore.
In a further twist, the zombies of the Return of the Living Dead had an explicit craving for brains, not just human flesh, giving the undead a horrifyingly singular purpose and increasing their threat and our fear. This brain-eating trope became synonymous with the genre over the next 2 decades, parodied countless times in other types of media, including but not limited to The Simpsons' Treehouse of Horror segment, Dial Z for Zombies, which is, by the way, a zombie masterpiece in and of itself.
What time does Freddy get off?
10 o'clock.
I ain't sitting here 2 fucking hours.
Oh, we could always go drive around.
I don't got gas. You want to buy some gas, idiot?
I was kidding. We could go fool around in there for a while.
You mean that cemetery? Oh,
Let's do that.
Remarkably, these zombies weren't just mindless brain-eating machines. They possessed a rudimentary intelligence, exemplified when they used a radio to lure more victims. Twice, in fact, thus making them an even more formidable force, their unpredictable cunning raising the stakes to all new heights.
Rescue 7, come in. This is dispatch. Do you copy over?
Come in, dispatch. Send more paramedics.
And yet, despite these terror-inducing traits, The Return of the Living Dead also made room for spurts of comedy, injecting humor into the undead apocalypse taking place in Louisville, Kentucky, a balance of horror and comedy that never took away from the film's relentlessness, aggressiveness, or its unnervingly frightening presentation. But The Return of the Living Dead was not a one-hit wonder. In fact, it spawned numerous sequels, each attempting to build on the rich lore of the original, with parts 2 and 3 being masterpieces in their own right, and parts 4 and 5 better left undiscussed. Indeed, The Return of the Living Dead's influence has seeped into the veins of pop culture, evident in Halloween costumes, zombie walk events, and countless other homages in television and film, even to this very day. It seems we can't escape The Return of the Living Dead. And why would we want to?
Give me the bone saw.
From redefining zombie characteristics, fusing horror with humor, spawning multiple sequels, and infecting the broader entertainment landscape, The Return of the Living Dead has carved out an indelible place in the annals of horror.
Get it off! Get it up! Get it off! Get it off! Get it off! Get it off! Out of break!
Decades on, the movie remains impactful, a testament to its innovative take on the genre. It's a perfect storm of horror, comedy, and relentless zombies, a formula that keeps audiences coming back, much like the undead hordes it features.
Who's there?
So, the next time you watch a zombie sprinting after a victim, a ghoul outsmarting the living, or hear the chilling call for brains, remember, the rotting roots of these tropes trace back to the 1985 masterpiece that is The Return of the Living Dead. A cornerstone of the horror genre, a genre bender, and a game changer, The Return of the Living Dead remains as vital and visceral as it was back in the mid-1980s. So, here's to The Return of the Living Dead for making us all fear, love, and respect the relentless pursuit of the living dead. After all, the movie serves as a chilling reminder that, much like the undead it features, the genre is constantly evolving, constantly resurrecting, and always hungry for more.
Show some fucking respect for the dead, will ya?
Good evening, boils and ghouls. Today, we will take an intriguing journey through the foggy realms of our beloved genre, where we will discuss two supposedly final chapters of two very different horror franchises, Halloween and Phantasm. This video will focus on why I believe Phantasm's swan song wins out over Halloween's most recent alleged final film. Of course, I speak of the fifth and final installment of the Phantasm series, Phantasm Ravager, a film that, in spite of its obvious budgetary constraints, stands as a more triumphant capstone to its franchise than the recent chapter of the juggernaut that is the Halloween franchise, Halloween Ends. It may seem like an audacious claim, but allow me to take you on a journey, a flight through the silver screen, or silver spheres, if you will, a tapestry woven with narratives and nightmares, where fantasy meets reality, and budget is obviously no obstacle to creativity and artistic vision. Firstly, let's address the specter in the room, the budget. Phantasm Ravager has the aesthetics of a very low-budget student film. But here's the twist. Isn't that part of its charm? The film doesn't pretend to be anything it's not, and its ambition transcends the boundaries of its own financial limitations, presenting an authentic, raw, and passionate vision. Then again, aside from perhaps Phantasm 2 or 3, the series has always thrived on a lean budget and creative pragmatism, am I right? Ravager, however, budget constraints aside, really gives you that palpable feeling of a true passion project, a labor of love from director David Hartman and creator Don Coscarelli, which allows it to resonate in a way that Halloween Ends, despite its polish and star-studded cast, simply doesn't. Ravager is a conclusion that feels right for the Phantasm franchise, a peculiar, dreamlike, and perplexing universe where a low budget can still allow for a surreal dreamscape to be imagined on screen, hence still aligning with the offbeat, disorientating charm of the series as a whole. It's an ode to the enduring spirit of indie filmmaking, its narrative resolution hinged on the emotional investment we've accumulated for the characters over 4 decades, showcases a depth that was less apparent in Halloween Ends. I mean, sure, one could say that the characters of Halloween Ends were more fleshed out and had better dialogue, but to those people I would have to ask you this. Why are the characters so abruptly different than they were in the previous 2 movies? Why do they make such poor decisions that simply do not align with their original characterizations? Why do they speak like they realized their characters in a movie versus their believable exchanges in 2018 and kills? I don't have an answer for those questions, but don't you dare try and tell me,
"It's been a few years, man. Everyone has gone through so much trauma. The town is just different now."
That's a bullshit reasoning, and an even more bullshit plot device they chose to throw in there. At least the characters we know and love on display in Ravager still feel like themselves and talk like themselves, and better yet, Ravager still feels like a Phantasm movie. Halloween Ends, well, does not feel like a Halloween movie. And speaking of character investment, Phantasm Ravager gives us the much anticipated character payoff for Reggie, portrayed by the ever-compelling Reggie Bannister. His journey, a beautiful, heartfelt, and intense exploration of loyalty, friendship, and resilience, has pretty much been the backbone of the series. We've watched him grow, evolve, struggle, and triumph as a character, making his final stand against the tall man in Ravager an emotional high point, and his supposed death at the end of the film a much-earned send-off. The narrative in Halloween Ends, however, doesn't quite strike the same chord. Take Myers, for example. Michael Myers, the supposed embodiment of pure, unadulterated evil, is less a direct threat and more a secondary background villain, replaced by Corey Cunningham, who is more or less the film's primary antagonist, at least for the majority of the runtime. The heavy-handed emotional threads and dumbed-down character choices that are woven throughout the film connect more to the carnage Corey creates after finding Myers than to Myers himself, causing a disconnect with its own franchise villain, an issue that Phantasm Ravager successfully avoids. Furthermore, the depth of the mythology in Phantasm Ravager surpasses that of Halloween Ends. The exploration of parallel dimensions, the alien nature of the tall man, the mysteries of the Sentinel spheres, these elements add a layer of fascination and complexity that Halloween Ends lacks with its more linear and predictable narrative. Phantasm Ravager invites us into a labyrinth of cosmic horror, a feat all the more impressive given its budgetary limitations. While Halloween Ends technically delivers a conclusion to its trilogy, it doesn't quite offer the emotional impact or narrative richness that Phantasm Ravager delivers. The epic final confrontation in Ravager, the poignant exploration of friendship, and the emotional depth the series has been building since 1979 culminates in a finale that resonates deeply with fans. In closing, the underdog triumphs in this tale. The finale of Phantasm, with all its quirkiness, low-budget charm, and depth of narrative, showcases the triumph of creativity, resilience, and passion over pure monetary power. The love letter to the fans that is Phantasm Ravager leaves us feeling satisfied, content, and dare I say it, a touch nostalgic. It's a testament that money cannot buy passion and creativity, a testament to the enduring spirit of independent cinema, and a testament to the horror genre itself. If that isn't a triumphant conclusion, I don't know what is. On this day, August 18th, 2023, horror aficionados find a unique reason to reminisce and shiver as we mark the 50th anniversary of the chilling fictional events depicted in the groundbreaking horror film The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Although the movie itself was released to the public in 1974, the spine-tingling events within the film's narrative were set on this very day in 1973. The film, which has since become a touchstone of the horror genre, masterfully blurred the lines between reality and fiction with its opening claim of being based on true events. While we will be celebrating the film's cinematic half-century milestone in 2024, today stands as a testament to its enduring ability to immerse audiences in a world of terror, making us all remember the harrowing journey of Sally Hardesty and her friends a half-century ago. It's a testament to the genius of director Tobe Hooper that The Texas Chainsaw Massacre continues to grip audiences even 5 decades after its fictional horrors were said to have unfolded. The gritty realism, the eerie atmosphere, and that unforgettable chainsaw-wielding antagonist, Leatherface, have cemented their place in the annals of cinematic history. As fans across the globe commemorate the in-film events today, it's worth noting how the film has influenced countless directors and inspired a slew of horror films over the years. From its innovative camera techniques to its psychological terror, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not just a film, but a phenomenon. As we approach the movie's release anniversary next year, in 2024, today's dark celebration reminds us of the undying power of storytelling and the enduring legacy of horror cinema's seminal classic. Happy Leatherface Day 2023! I really enjoyed the 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as well as its 2006 prequel. However, a particular element of the 2003 film always bothered me. They severed Leatherface's arm in the third act. This move essentially nullified the chances of a straightforward sequel. Can you imagine a one-armed Leatherface trying to be menacing? It would either come off as odd or unintentionally comedic. I've heard there's a comic book that continues the 2003 storyline, where Leatherface gets a prosthetic arm with a hook, though I've yet to read it. Given the success of the 2003 remake, had they not made that narrative choice, I believe we might have seen not just one, but possibly multiple sequels. Man, what a missed opportunity. What do you think? While the filmmakers of Texas Chainsaw 3D, the 2013 requel to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, had some narrative continuity missteps and timeline inconsistencies, notably jumbling dates and not concealing modern tech in the storyline, I genuinely adore this film. It boasts a compelling story, an outstanding cast, and while its continuity problems prevent it from reaching perfection, it stands head and shoulders above the 2022 version, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I can't help but wish Texas Chainsaw 3D was set entirely in 1973 though, during its captivating Prologue events. Picture it transforming into a gripping road movie, with the family escaping a blazing home, facing tumultuous events throughout, and ultimately culminating with the remnants of the Sawyer family discovering their new lair, the deserted Texas Battleland theme park from the iconic sequel, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. This would have seamlessly integrated the 1986 sequel into the timeline, uniting the Sawyers and their subsequent setting. What a missed opportunity indeed. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise, with its eerie undertones and terrifying visuals, has nonetheless struggled with maintaining narrative consistency across its sequels. Specifically, the seeming disconnect between the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, can be attributed to the ever-changing dynamics of production teams, including shifts in directors and writers. Each brought a unique touch, interpretation, and vision to the films they worked on, and this often led to certain story elements being prioritized over strict narrative cohesion. Regarding Leatherface's unexplained survival from the explosion in Part 2, horror franchises frequently operate on a different logic when it comes to their central antagonists. These villains, especially in long-standing franchises, develop into larger-than-life figures that seemingly escape death in inexplicable ways, ensuring that they return to terrify once more. The brief appearance of Stretch in the third installment, while a subtle nod to the previous movie, also underlines this approach. The cameo suggests that there's a larger world where these characters' stories still coexist, but it also indicates that the main priority of these films is not necessarily linear storytelling. Instead, the essence lies in the chilling horror and dread that Leatherface and his sinister family evoke. But what do you think? Leatherface, the iconic chainsaw-wielding character from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, has been portrayed in various lights across different adaptations. In the traditional version, as seen in the initial films and several sequels, Leatherface is presented as a character who, while undeniably vicious and terrifying, is more of a tragic figure. He is depicted as being severely mentally challenged, operating largely under the influence of his more dominant family members. His violent tendencies, in this characterization, stem from a twisted sense of family loyalty and an absence of moral grounding rather than inherent evil. On the other hand, the brute version of Leatherface, as represented in the 2003 remake and its 2006 prequel, leans more heavily into the image of a relentless and almost superhuman force of terror. This version of Leatherface is much less nuanced, displaying an animalistic rage and drive that seems to come more from innate malevolence than any external influence. Between the two, the traditional portrayal offers a more layered and psychologically intricate character, making the horror not just about the overt violence, but also the disturbing family dynamics and the manipulation of a vulnerable individual. In contrast, the brute version dials up the raw terror and might appeal more to audiences seeking a straightforward and intense horror experience. I think, overall, that I prefer the more quote-unquote traditional version of the character, but I can appreciate how the nuances in Leatherface's character across adaptations add depth and varied shades of horror to the series overall. Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The New Generation is considered by many to be the most unconventional and offbeat entry in the franchise. One of the primary reasons for this assessment is its radical departure from the visceral horror and gritty tone that characterized the earlier films. Instead, The New Generation introduces a surreal and frenetic tone that creates a jarring juxtaposition against the backdrop of the horrifying Leatherface and his deranged family. This shift to a more abstract and less intense tone, intentional or not, led to moments that felt more off-kilter than horrifying. The narrative also moves away from a straightforward slasher premise, incorporating subplots that feel dissenting to the established lore of the series, such as Leatherface going full-on drag queen and the inclusion of an Illuminati-type organization. Another factor contributing to the film's oddity is its eclectic cast and character choices. The casting of Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey in key roles, both of whom would later become A-list stars, creates a viewing experience that feels unexpected given their subsequent career trajectories. McConaughey's portrayal of Vilmer, a psychotic killer with a mechanical leg, is over the top and wildly different from the grounded performances he would later be known for. Well, somewhat known for at least. Leatherface's portrayal in this installment is also less of the menacing butcher we know and love, and more of a tormented soul, confused about his own identity in a more extreme fashion than in any of the films prior. This take on the character, while intriguing, diverged significantly from what fans had come to expect. All of these elements combined to make the Texas Chainsaw Massacre the new generation, an eccentric outlier in the franchise, leading to its polarized reception among fans and critics. But what do you think of this movie? Halloween 3: Season of the Witch stands out as a unique and atmospheric addition to the Halloween series. Although it deviates from the franchise by not featuring Michael Myers himself, it has cemented itself as a seasonal classic. It's garnered a vast cult following and has become a top pick for contemporary horror enthusiasts. Today, however, our focus isn't on the merits of the film or its place in the series. Instead, we delve into one of the film's most intriguing questions. How did Conal Cochran and his Silver Shamrock Company manage to transport a piece of Stonehenge to the American town of Santa Mira, California? In the movie, it's known that a piece of Stonehenge has vanished, but the details of its disappearance, how, where, and by whom, remain a mystery. Later on, Conal Cochran discloses that his company, Silver Shamrock, is behind the theft. This Stonehenge fragment is crucial for their sinister plan, involving deadly Halloween masks embedded with bits of the stone. When confronting our protagonist, Dr. Daniel Chalice, Cochran tantalizingly hints, "You wouldn't believe how we did it." While the film leaves us without a definitive answer, it offers an intriguing plot point that sparks fun speculation among fans. But before diving into my theory on how Silver Shamrock stealthily transported the Stonehenge piece from Europe to the USA, let's hear from our good friend CHH and learn about his personal hypothesis on the matter. CHH, take it away.
You want to know how I think they got Stonehenge back to the factory? My guess is I got no effing clue, if you want the honest truth. How did they get it back? The only thing I can think of is they frickin' airlifted the son of a bitch. Cochran's got enough money to have a plane, right? He probably just soared that sucker up in the sky and took off and got it there. If he didn't do that, the only thing I can think that No. I got nothing. I seriously have no idea how in God's name they got the damn thing back to California. I mean, it's Stonehenge. Somebody's gonna notice it. Brandon, what the hell do you think? I swear to God, I have no effing clue how they got the damn thing back. I got no clue.
And there it is. A big thanks to CHH for sharing his insights and inspiring the idea for this video in the first place. In my view, the answer doesn't revolve around dark magic, advanced science, or any mystical means of transporting the Stonehenge piece. Given Conal Cochran and Silver Shamrock's immense industrial influence and their sway over various global factions, I don't believe the Stonehenge segment was quote-unquote stolen in the conventional sense. I surmise it was a meticulously coordinated operation involving international collaborations and shadowy governmental networks. These entities facilitated the stone's movement to Santa Mira, converging for Cochran's grand scheme to orchestrate a mass child sacrifice on Halloween. I imagine the stone was carefully extracted, then transported via road or helicopter to a harbor, subsequently shipped to the US mainland, and finally conveyed by truck to Santa Mira, California. All this with the full approval and involvement of multiple global government agencies. The public narrative of the stone being stolen was merely a smokescreen, obscuring the fact that several governmental bodies had sinister agendas, ultimately culminating in the mass extermination of children on Halloween itself. He had backing at every step of the way. In conclusion, where do you land on this theory? And once more, A massive thanks to CHH for inspiring this video and for his invaluable contribution to it. In the words of Conal Cochran,
"You don't really know much about Halloween."
In 2010, audiences were reintroduced to a film franchise that, for many, was a cornerstone of their adolescent fears, A Nightmare on Elm Street. This wasn't the original terrifying tale from the 80s that many of us grew up with. Instead, it was a modern take on the original legend, and in this new version, there was almost a revolutionary shift in the narrative that was teased but never fully realized. Picture this: Freddy Krueger, the infamous nightmare that haunted our dreams with his burned face and razor fingers, might have been an innocent man. A man who was, tragically, wrongfully accused and met a violent end for crimes he actually never committed. The film hinted at this possibility, and for a moment, as an audience, we were caught in a whirlwind of doubt, sympathy, and confusion. However, as the story unfolds, this tantalizing idea of an innocent Freddy Krueger is pulled away from us. It turns out to be a mere deception, a game Krueger himself played. He was indeed the villain of our nightmares, guilty of every sin attributed to him, sins far more hideous and evil than those perpetrated by the original version of Freddy Krueger. Because while the original version was a child murderer, the 2010 reinterpretation of the character was also a straight-up pedophile, in addition to being a child murderer as well. But imagine for a moment the sheer narrative genius if they had committed to that twist, if they had chosen to pivot and present a Freddy who was more victim than culprit. This would not only have breathed fresh life into an age-old tale, but it would have also offered a completely new perspective on the entire franchise. Freddy Krueger, no longer just the monster under our beds, but a tragic figure, framed and vilified, seeking justice in the only way he knew how. This, my friends, could have been a story for the ages, and could have made the film better in the eyes of a large number of people, including myself. Yet, for reasons that remain unclear, the filmmakers decided to let this idea remain just that, a fleeting idea. They used this potential game-changing twist as nothing more than a distraction, a red herring to momentarily shake the audience. In my humble opinion, it was a missed opportunity of epic proportions. They had a chance to not only reimagine, but redefine a classic for a whole new generation. But alas, they chose to tread the well-worn path, and in doing so, missed a chance at storytelling greatness. A while back, an interesting idea emerged from the lips of none other than Robert Englund, the original Freddy Krueger. Yes, the very man who made our childhoods a tapestry of terrifying nightmares. He suggested the iconic Kevin Bacon to step into the shoes of Elm Street's darkest villain. Now, some might raise their eyebrows at this. Kevin Bacon? The Footloose star? The man who taught us the 6 degrees? Think about it. Kevin Bacon possesses a certain depth, gravitas, and intensity that would most likely be perfect for Freddy Krueger. Remember his roles in Mystic River or The Woodsman? Bacon has displayed a broad range of emotions, from profound sorrow to sheer malevolence, suggesting that he could, in fact, bring something fresh, unique, and terrifying to the role of Freddy Krueger. However, a point of contention arises when we consider his age. Admittedly, Kevin Bacon is not the young starlet fresh out of Hollywood's oven, and thus, committing to a sprawling franchise might be a bit too ambitious. But let's dissect that for a moment. Does Freddy Krueger really need to be played by a young man? Isn't his agelessness a part of his terror? Freddy is, after all, a dream demon. Age should be but a minor inconvenience for him, as far as the person playing his role is concerned. But for the sake of argument, let's say age is a factor. Well, even then, I truly believe Kevin Bacon could helm at least a trilogy of films, 3 movies where he delves deep into the psyche of the character, and, who knows, maybe even reinvents Freddy for a new generation. Just imagine the sheer intensity he could bring to the table, a nuanced, layered, and possibly even a sympathetic Freddy. perhaps one wrongfully burned for crimes he did not commit, committing to the plot twist the 2010 remake introduced but didn't follow through with. So, I pose the question to you. In this ever-evolving world of reboots, remakes, and cinematic universes, isn't it time for a fresh take on our nightmares? And if so, could Kevin Bacon be the visionary choice to once again make us afraid of falling asleep? At least for a few films? What do you think? In slasher films, it's a curious phenomenon that audiences often find themselves rooting for the killers rather than the often irritating teenagers or young adults. One reason could be that the killers, such as Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, or Leatherface, are just so iconic and unforgettable in their respective roles. Another reason could be the portrayal of the characters themselves. Sometimes they're so grating that it feels almost satisfying to see their on-screen demises. Speaking of iconic killers, let's specifically delve deeper into the topic of Freddy Krueger, the menacing figure with burned skin and a razor-sharp glove from the Nightmare on Elm Street series. In the initial movies, from parts 1 through 6, and including Freddy vs. Jason, the storyline presents Freddy as a child murderer who, due to legal loopholes, was released. However, an outraged group of parents sought vengeance directly, and burned him alive. Despite such a gruesome backstory, the movies still found ways to make Freddy an almost likable character. The films usually showcased older teenagers and young adults, often characterized as annoying and/or unlikable, being Freddy's victims. Thus, as the 1980s and the early 1990s progressed and Freddy became a symbol for that generation, audiences found it increasingly easy to cheer for him, even though he was a dreaded child murderer. I'm obviously leaving New Nightmare out of this discussion since that was merely a demon taking on the form of Freddy and was not actually bound by the history of the character, but nonetheless, let's move on to the meat and potatoes of this video. Freddy Krueger, as depicted in the 2010 remake, is not solely a child murderer, but additionally, a pedophile as well. So not only was this version heinous, but also undeniably evil in every imaginable way, thus creating a version of Freddy Krueger that, no matter how many sequels he would have gotten, which thankfully was none, you could never root for this guy. You could never champion this version of Freddy. You could never have the pop culture embracement of the 2010 version of Freddy Krueger that you did with the original Robert Englund version. Never. And that's one of the biggest issues with the remake. People want to be able to embrace and root for Freddy Krueger, at least to a certain extent. But once you make him an actual pedophile within the story, all of that stuff gets thrown right out of the window, and it just makes us hate the character, and rightfully so. If the producers were aiming to make Freddy someone you hated and didn't want to root for, they succeeded. But the issue again is that people themselves want to be able to root for Freddy Krueger, and they cannot do that with the 2010 version. Now, some argue that the original Freddy Krueger from the 80s was also a pedophile, but that's a misconception. Wes Craven, the creator of Freddy Krueger and the director of both the original film and New Nightmare, clarified that although they initially toyed with this idea, it was dropped before the first film was ever even shot. Hence, the difference in the character's portrayal significantly impacted audience reception. Freddy from the 80s, played by Englund, was a fan favorite, whereas the 2010 version, portrayed by Jackie Earle Haley, was not well received. There's a common argument referencing Freddy vs. Jason to counter the above distinction. While there is a scene during the opening of the film that showcases Krueger killing a small child, at least the before and after, a particular scene later in the movie suggests that Freddy has an affinity for little girls, which does conflict with Craven's original vision. This was a significant oversight by the producers of Freddy vs. Jason, and one of many misjudgments in the film, adding to a long list of continuity fumbles Freddy vs. Jason presents, and it should be taken with a huge grain of salt. Although I do love Freddy vs. Jason though. In conclusion, while the original Freddy Krueger was a child killer, he was not a pedophile, setting him apart from the despicable 2010 version. This distinction largely explains why audiences felt closer to England's Freddy and rightfully and expectedly distant from Haley's portrayal. Not to say this was Haley's fault, he didn't write the movie, but people want to be able to root for Freddy, and there's just no way in hell anybody can root for that version of the character. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 is an indisputably unique piece of horror film history. Directed by Tobe Hooper and released in 1986, 12 years after the groundbreaking original film, this movie is viewed by many as the true, organic successor to the original film, a designation not lightly bestowed. So, why is this film heralded as the one true sequel? The answer lies in its fearless exploration of the grotesque, its layered character development, its socio-cultural commentary, and its retention of the key creative force behind the original film, Tobe Hooper himself. Firstly, let's tackle the why. The why that asks, why is this film deemed such an excellent sequel despite its initial mixed reviews? As a sequel, it does what many other follow-ups fail to do. It retains the essence of the original film while forging its own path. This is a tall order for any sequel, yet the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 rises to the occasion. The film is a masterpiece in subverting expectations. Rather than merely retreading the original film's path, it amplifies its elements and branches into new territories. It embraces a more satirical, darkly comedic tone, while retaining the grotesque, brutal horror that made the original film so memorable. This deft blending of humor and horror, a difficult balance to strike, gives the film its distinct flavor, different from the original, yet intricately connected. What truly sets the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 apart is its audacious exploration of the grotesque. It revels in the grim, the gory, and the gruesome. The film showcases its relentless, unapologetic brutality, building upon the visceral terror introduced in the original film. This sequel expands upon the original's horrors, introducing audiences to a nightmarishly detailed underground lair, surreal death sequences, and Leatherface's more cartoonish, yet unnervingly chaotic, family dynamics. The film's commitment to pushing boundaries makes it deeply unsettling, and, in its own twisted way, groundbreaking. Another reason why this sequel shines lies in its characterization. Leatherface evolves from the original, now a more complex character with strange, perverse tendencies, while the new characters introduced, like Stretch and Lefty, add depth and intrigue. This sequel doesn't simply rely on shock value. It explores human depravity in ways that are disturbingly intimate and nuanced. And let's not forget about the importance of socio-cultural commentary. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre was widely interpreted as a critique of the American dream's darker side, and the sequel carries this forward. It lays bare the country's obsession with violence, consumerism, and sensationalism. The film's macabre satire of these cultural norms makes it compelling and unnerving. As for what makes it scary, well, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 works its frights in multifaceted ways. It takes the horrifying imagery of the original film and ups the ante. The sequel's palpable tension, layered with more explicit gore, creates a disturbing atmosphere that lingers with viewers. But perhaps the most terrifying thing is the film's audacity to laugh at the horror itself, to draw us into its unsettling world, where we find ourselves both horrified and darkly amused. This dynamic engages our fear responses in ways that straightforward horror films simply can't. Finally, it's important to note the continuity in direction. Tobe Hooper, the visionary behind the original film, returned to direct this sequel. Hooper's unique understanding of the franchise, its characters, and the horror genre's capabilities undoubtedly contributes to the sequel's success. His distinctive style shines through, making the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 feel like a true successor to the original. In conclusion, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 is a successful sequel due to its fearless exploration of the grotesque, its nuanced character development, its insightful socio-cultural commentary, and its authentic connection to the original film through both its story and its returning director. It remains a standout in the franchise because it dares to be different while retaining the original film's spirit. Though the film may not be for everybody, for those who appreciate its audacious creativity, it remains a significant contribution to the horror genre, etching an unforgettable place in cinematic history. And as they say, dog will hunt. When we speak of the word reboot, it carries a certain weight with it, an echo of the old, but an anticipation of the new. That anticipation is a heavy one, filled with expectations and conjectures about how the old will be reformed into the new, and whether the new will hold true to the old. This is the tricky part. It's not about merely copy and pasting the old, but reimagining it into a landscape that's current, pertinent, and most importantly, impactful. When we talk about the 2022 reboot of Hellraiser, let me clarify something up front. It's a very good Hellraiser film. There is no doubt about that. It's dark, twisted, and filled with those goosebump-inducing moments that made us fall in love with the original franchise. It still has the feel of a world that is grim, yet fascinating, horrifying, yet captivating. It still has the complex, captivating characters and the macabre, mind-bending narratives that we've come to associate with this franchise. The reboot takes its heart from the essence of Hellraiser. It takes the spine-chilling, the bizarre, and the hauntingly intriguing elements of the original and wraps them in an all-new package. The result is a film that is both a tribute to its predecessors and a new path forward, merging the old with the new in a way that satisfies both the nostalgia-prone old-school fans and the new-age audiences craving something new and exciting. The quality of the 2022 reboot is inarguable. It outshines the latter entries in the original franchise with its grit, rawness, and innovative storytelling, and stands as a testament to how far the franchise has come, whether you enjoyed those aforementioned latter entries or not. But when we start discussing Hellraiser 2022 as the first entry in a grand reimagining of the Hellraiser mythos, which it is in fact supposed to be, we start stepping onto shaky ground. Has it done enough to reset the board, to lay down a new foundation upon which a refreshed, redefined Hellraiser universe can be built? The answer to that question is less than clear-cut for some people. But to me, the answer to that question is a cut and dry yes. Yes, it does. Being a hardcore fanatic of Hellbound Hellraiser 2, I firmly believe that the enduring legacy of the series wouldn't have been as notable or profound without its sequel. While the original Hellraiser certainly had its charm, I wouldn't classify it as an outright masterpiece or as an outstanding introduction to the Hellraiser universe as a whole. It worked, but it only worked as well as it did because it was followed up by Hellbound. And don't get me wrong, I have a deep appreciation for the original movie. However, its grandeur hardly surpasses that of the 2022 adaptation, barring Doug Bradley's exceptional portrayal of Pinhead and the iconic Cenobite designs, which were undeniably superior in the 1987 version when compared to the 2022 film. Yet, the 2022 Hellraiser boasts a distinct Cenobite lineup, a reimagined Lament configuration, captivating locations, and prominently showcases Leviathan, the god of hell, which is incredibly intriguing since Leviathan hasn't graced the screen since Hellbound Hellraiser 2. Drawing such connections to Hellbound cements the 2022 film's intent and has me completely on board with where the series could go from here. While it has its flaws and some characters might irk the audience, its narrative, acting, score, cinematography, and the rendition of Pinhead are commendable. A sight to behold, albeit briefly, is Leviathan's majestic presence hovering over Hell's labyrinth, reminiscent of its last appearance in Hellbound. Leviathan is also repeatedly referenced in 2022's storyline, which absolutely puts a smile on my face. In essence, the 2022 Hellraiser serves as a promising opener for a refreshed series, and if the 1987 installment is lauded as a commendable kickoff to the original series, then it's only fair to accord the same respect to its 2022 counterpart. In the end, though the film does do a good job of reintroducing us to the Hellraiser mythos, albeit a different rendition of said mythos, and while the film may not be the most perfect beginning to an entirely new saga, this reboot has in fact done what many before it have failed to do. It has taken the spirit of the original and recast it in a new exciting form. It has given us a Hellraiser film that is worthy of the name. It is, undeniably, a fantastic start. I, for one, am excited to see where the franchise goes from here, and hopefully it does go somewhere, rather than nowhere. This reboot may not be perfect, but it is a promising start, and that's more than we could have asked for. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed critics, and ardent cinema aficionados, today I would like to delve into a topic that stirs quite the debate in the realm of horror, the stark juxtaposition of two works of cinema, Pearl and X. Let's explore the nature of these two movies, their distinguishing traits, and why, in my humble opinion, Pearl was a remarkable piece of cinema that towered over its very underwhelming and run-of-the-mill sibling. Firstly, let us visit X. Released with high expectations in 2022, it came adorned with a sheen of hype and promise that was, unfortunately, never fully realized. X can be described as an extravaganza of shock value, a dizzying spectacle of sensory overload, designed purely for the audience's reaction. It seems to have forgotten the immortal words of Alfred Hitchcock, who once said, "There is no terror in the bang, only in the anticipation of it." Instead, X sacrificed substance for sensationalism, and deep character development for surface-level spectacle. It traded the eerie beauty of suspense for cheap, immediate thrills. A film, let us remember, is not a roller coaster, it's a journey. A journey that takes its audiences through a series of well-crafted events that inspire a multitude of emotions, not merely a race from one shock to the next. But with all that said, I am highly aware that X is in fact a slasher movie at its core, and being the slasher aficionado that I am, if I do say so myself, I will say that most, if not all slasher movies, are in fact built around sensationalism rather than substance, and I am usually completely on board with that approach, especially in slasher movies. But the difference with X is this. I feel like we were promised more from the onset than just a bare-bones slasher movie, and more is simply not what X gave us. But I will give it this. It did have the three things that most slasher movies are typically supposed to have: an isolated location, lots of kills, and lots of nudity. So there's that. Now, contrast all of that with X's prequel, which released a few months later in 2022, Pearl. A film that didn't just showcase the horror genre, it transcended it, blending it beautifully with dramatic storytelling. What we saw in Pearl was nothing short of a drama horror masterpiece. It presented us to a story that had depth, characters that were as real as any of us, and a narrative that was hauntingly beautiful. It was not afraid to be quiet when quiet was called for, to build tension, and to just let the audience's own imagination run absolutely wild, right there along with Pearl's. This is the mark of a true horror film, one that respects its audiences enough to let them fill in some of the nooks and crannies of the narrative that we don't explicitly see on screen. Pearl understood that the allure of the horror genre isn't solely the capacity to shock, but its ability to probe the darker corners of the human psyche, to expose our fears and frailties. It respected its audience, trusting them to appreciate the slow burn, the careful weaving of story threads that ultimately created a tapestry of terror and tension. Pearl was not merely a horror film. It was a cinematic symphony that wove fear, curiosity, and empathy together into a moving narrative. Pearl presented to us characters that were more than mere mannequins in the shop window of the horror genre. They were real, they were relatable, and this was a key to the film's success. When they hurt, we hurt. When they were afraid, we shared in their fear. X, on the other hand, gave us characters that were two-dimensional, used as more shock fodder than individuals with compelling stories and emotional depths of their own. The direction and cinematography of Pearl was exceptional as well, a true testament to the art of filmmaking. Each shot was meticulously crafted, each scene framed in a way that added layers of meaning and contributed to the overall narrative. X fell short in this regard, its cinematography more akin to a frantic search for the next big jump scare than a thoughtful expression of visual storytelling. This may sound pretentious to some of you, but it's also the truth. Pearl is art. It is a colorful canvas whereon emotions, thoughts, and experiences are painted. Pearl managed to be a mirror that reflected our fears, our hopes, and our humanity. Even in the midst of its chaos and utterly insane titular villain, we could still relate to her frantic need to escape her restrictive home life and to be something more than just normal. As vain an endeavor as it may be, we could all relate to that. X, while not without its moments, was a music video, prioritizing shock and awe over authenticity and emotional resonance, which again is fine and dandy when it comes to the slasher genre, but since it was presented as something bigger and followed up by such a gargantuanly impressive prequel, it's hard to look past these factors that make X just another slasher movie. So, is it a crime that X took this approach? Is it a crime that X was in fact just a simple slasher movie? Absolutely not. But it does stick out like a sore thumb when a prequel like Pearl comes along, a prequel that does not Xerox or ride the coattails of its predecessor, but instead promises and delivers an elevation of the art itself, expanding the world of X in ways that X itself hasn't earned and absolutely does not deserve. This is why, despite the noise and fanfare around X, we find our hearts returning to Pearl, a true beacon of the horror drama genre. Pearl is superior to X, not because it's quieter, slower, or more dramatically inclined, but because it respects its audience, it respects the craft of filmmaking, and above all, it respects the power of a good story. As the chilling teaser for Terrifier 3 unfolded before my eyes, I felt a cold unease settle in. This wasn't the familiar shiver of delight from horror's usual embrace, but a deep, sinking dread. The imagery of a small child, a toddler at that, innocent and wide-eyed, calling out to a figure she mistakes for Santa Claus, it's a picture that should warm the heart, not prelude a nightmare. Yet, there he was, Art the Clown, the icon of the Terrifier franchise, not carrying gifts, but the weight of impending doom in the form of a gnarled, old axe. This is not the kind of terror I seek. Horror, in its purest form, is escapism, a thrilling dance with the macabre. We delight in the adrenaline and the safety of knowing it's fiction, but when a child, a representation of pure innocence, is implied to face a grisly fate, the dance stops. It's not entertaining. It's not thrilling. It's a line crossed, a boundary broken that should remain intact, even in our most daring horror fantasies. I can't help but wonder, are we so desensitized that we find the concept of a toddler's on-screen demise a tantalizing hook? Does it not pierce through the veil of fiction into the realm of unsettling reality? Horror has the power to shock, to provoke, to unsettle, but it should also know its boundaries, especially when it comes to the innocent. Some argue that it's only a movie, but that's a hollow defense when it challenges our moral compass. If the terror doesn't serve the story, if it's just a grotesque display for shock's sake, then it has failed its purpose. It has failed the fans, the genre, and its own legacy. The original All Hallows Eve may have in fact showcased horrors bestowed upon young children, but it was, thankfully, merely the aftermath, not the act itself. And to me, there's a big difference between the kids of All Hallows Eve and the 3 or 4-year-old seen in Terrifier 3's teaser trailer. Whether her death would be off-screen or on-screen, I don't want to see that in a horror movie, and I hope you don't either. Cue all the people coming out of the woodwork saying, well, they killed Gage in Pet Sematary. And to that, I would ask you this. Can you really not see the distinction between a story-serving plot beat taken from a novel versus a toddler being gruesomely savaged for the sake of pure shock value? And listen, I'm all about freedom of speech and the freedom to create art as you see fit, but I have to ask where in the sand the line of acceptable and unacceptable is drawn. If it's acceptable and even embraced by large facets of the horror community to kill children, babies, and toddlers in horror movies because it's art, does this mean that people of the same mindset are completely on board with seeing scenes of rape or child molestation on film? Is that art? Where do you people draw the line? Or is nothing off the table for you because it's quote-unquote art? Again, I don't want to see any of this stuff in my horror movies, but I understand that people have the freedom to do so within their art if they want to, and I understand that no one is actually being hurt, but at some point, the morality of all this has to be questioned, and if you're somebody who wants to see this stuff in movies because it, quote, raises the stakes, or because it, quote, shows how hardcore Art the Clown is, then I have to question you as a human being. What if this scene played out as a molestation sequence rather than a murder sequence? Would you people be screaming, "It's fake, man, it's just art"? I hope not, but a lot of you people have me wondering. And what of Art the Clown, the villain we love to fear? If he commits this atrocity, can we, in good conscience, continue to watch? There's a twisted delight in rooting for the villain in horror films, but only up to a certain point. When the villain's acts become too vile, too real, our allegiance crumbles. We turn away, not because we can't handle the horror, but because we refuse to accept such an abhorrent act as entertainment. This is the same reason people walked away from the 2010 version of Freddy Krueger, because he was made into an explicit pedophile versus just being a child killer like in the original continuity. People want to root for their bad guys, but when you cross a certain line, people just hate said bad guys and abandon them and their franchises entirely. And I suppose, with that thought process, you could wonder why it was okay for Freddy to be a child killer, but not Art. Well, we never see Freddy Krueger kill a small child in those movies, unless you count the cutaway scream of the little girl in Freddy vs. Jason. We mainly see him targeting older teenagers that we know are played by people in their mid to late 20s. Do you see the distinction here? I know some of you are scrambling to find the flaws in my logic, but alas, I'm not here to argue with you. In fact, if you're in the comment section arguing for the murder of toddlers and small children in movies, then you're already furthering my point. There's a lot of sick people out there, more than I'm comfortable with, if we're being honest. So please, if you disagree with me that much on this, feel free to leave the channel. So I stand, a fan of horror, a father, a human being, hoping against hope that this teaser is a misdirect, that the filmmakers understand the line they are toying with. Should this scene play out in its implied brutality, they risk not only the integrity of Terrifier 3, but the essence of what it means to be a fan of this twisted circus of horror that is the Terrifier franchise as a whole. We watch these films to confront our fears, to revel in the adrenaline, to emerge safely on the other side, having survived the dark. But let us remember, even in the darkest of tales, there should be a glimmer of restraint, a respect for the innocence that horror should never claim. You don't want to kill the Terrifier franchise? Then heed this plea. Don't kill children. With all that said, I don't actually think they're going to kill the toddler. At least I hope they won't. I think the teaser was purposely made this way to stir this controversy and build awareness of the film. And if that's the case, then mission accomplished. I've said this before, and I'll certainly say it again. The version of Jason Voorhees on display in Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, is absolutely terrifying, undeniably horrifying, and certainly the only incarnation of Jason Voorhees within the entire franchise that I actually find to be genuinely frightening. Today, I would like to discuss this version of Jason Voorhees specifically and see if we can start to pull apart the many layers of what made this incarnation of Jason truly bone-chilling, besides the absolutely flawless presentation from Kane Hodder, which is obviously and inarguably a huge factor in what made this Jason so damn spooky. A vital element that distinguishes this version of Jason is the environment in which he operates. Previous installments confined Jason to the desolate and secluded Camp Crystal Lake, but in Jason Takes Manhattan, the film transposes Jason onto a doomed cruise ship, as well as an urban landscape, two entirely new settings that force us to reimagine the character and the danger he represents. The cruise ship, filled with thrill-seeking teenagers in an array of contrastingly spooky nooks, crannies, corridors, and crevices, is a remarkably creepy location that makes the already spooky Jason Voorhees even spookier as we see him stalking his victims, observing his potential victims, and generally lingering about the ship. The approaching storm and rough seas only add to the very atmospheric location and showcase Mr. Voorhees in ways we've never seen before. New York City, as we all know, is a place of life and chaos, teeming with people, sights, and sounds. The sheer notion of Jason Voorhees, an unstoppable force of nature, hunting his victims through the crowded streets of New York City, aboard subways, or within its labyrinth of alleyways, adds a whole new dimension of terror to the character. It's not about the isolation anymore. It's about the omnipresent dread that Jason could be lurking anywhere, even in a bustling city that never sleeps. Now, let's dive into Jason's appearance. A crucial aspect of what makes a horror character frightening is their visual representation. And in Jason Takes Manhattan, Jason's look is arguably at its most gruesome up to this point. His face, revealed near the end of the movie, is an utterly nightmarish spectacle, deformed beyond any recognizable humanity, looking more akin to a melted and nightmarish rendition of the Toxic Avenger than his very skull-headed appearance in The New Blood just one film prior. And although his spine and ribcage were very much visible in the previous film, Jason Voorhees in Jason Takes Manhattan just feels nastier somehow. He's covered in perpetual slime, his skin looks more like that of a rotting fish than the brown zombified decay as seen in The New Blood, and while we can't see the aforementioned spine or ribcage on display in JTM, this version of Jason still somehow manages to be more visually striking, compelling, and downright scary. And this grotesque visage is a stark reminder of the abomination that Jason Voorhees has become, imbuing him with an element of body horror that is considerably more pronounced than in other films, again, at least up to this point. In addition to his appearance, the way Jason operates in this film is also a source of enhanced horror. Jason is more direct in his approach in Jason Takes Manhattan, much like he was in The New Blood, but in this film, he's no longer just lurking in the shadows of the woods and killing birthday partygoers when he's given the chance, but instead he's doing it from the shadows and hideaways within the confines of the aforementioned and very much doomed cruise ship, which adds an incredibly creepy layer of menace to his already dangerous mode of operation. Also, Jason is actively hunting his prey in plain sight in this film, at least once they finally make it to NYC. I mean, he's being seen by a ton of people in Times Square, in the subway, in the diner, plus a slew of other locations. While seeing a psychotic zombie stomping down Fifth Avenue was surely nothing new for the residents of NYC at the time, for us, the viewers, seeing Jason so public and uncaring about being seen in a crowd was shockingly new and very much unexplored territory. This bluntness in his violence, menace, and pursuit is chilling because it demonstrates his relentless nature, his lack of fear, and his total disregard for the bustling society around him. If he can kill without fear of consequence in a city full of people, what hope does any one person have? Let's talk about his seeming omnipresence in this film. His victims try everything to escape, moving through the labyrinth of the city, boarding a subway, but no matter what, he is always there. His ability to appear anywhere at any time, even in a metropolis as expansive as New York City, only solidifies the fear of the inevitable that is Jason Voorhees. It's a sense of dread that no matter how far or fast you run, Jason is always one step behind. This quote-unquote ability that Jason has, which many have dubbed as his teleportation ability, furthers that theme of inescapable doom. This eerie ability to keep up with his fleeing victims despite their best efforts to escape or hide heightens the sense of Jason's otherworldliness. There is no logic or physical law that can deter him or slow him down. He is a supernatural force of nature, not bound by human limitations. With that said, I don't think he's actually teleporting within the context of the story. I think this phenomenon is due to a combination of three things: the editing, the pacing of the film, and the pursuit of very on-the-nose thrills and chills because of the seeming teleportation technique. But I don't think Jason is actually teleporting here, but I could be wrong, but I really think it's just for the sake of the film. He's not actually teleporting. Jason Voorhees in Jason Takes Manhattan embodies the concentrated essence of fear. There is no way to stop him, no way to fight back. All you can do is run, hide, and hope that you're not next on his list. His move to an urban environment, his gruesome appearance, the directness and public nature of his violence, his omnipresence, his supernatural abilities, and his unkillability all come together to create a visceral version of a horror character with unprecedented intensity, an entity of pure, relentless terror that outshines any other incarnation of Jason Voorhees as far as his legitimate fear factor goes. It's not just about Kane Hodder's impeccable performance, it's about the totality of the character and his manifestation within these two very unique settings, the boat and NYC. Jason Takes Manhattan Jason is absolutely nightmare fuel. Ladies and gentlemen, today we venture into the world of words and films, the land of novels and their cinematic counterparts, and we face a question that's been the source of countless debates, countless discussions. Should you read the book before you watch the movie? Or should you, perhaps, reverse this often prescribed course and watch the movie before immersing yourself in the source material? Firstly, let me clarify. The argument is not to suggest the superiority of one medium over the other. Novels are remarkable creations, encapsulating worlds within words and painting vibrant landscapes within our minds. Movies, on the other hand, are audio-visual wonders, captivating us with the stunning visuals and performances, breathtaking sequences, and stirring music that only film can offer. Both, in their own rights, are magnificent methods of storytelling. However, it is the relationship between the two that we're here to scrutinize today, and I proclaim that watching the movie before reading the book offers a more enriching experience overall. I'm aware this might seem like heresy to some book purists out there, but bear with me. Consider this. You've just read a fantastic novel. It's moved you, it's entertained you, it's made you think. Now, you discover that there's a movie based on this book. Excited, you walk into the cinema, eager to see the characters you've come to know, the story you've come to love, brought to life on the silver screen. But then, disappointment strikes. The movie doesn't match up to your expectations, it doesn't align with your imagination. Characters, settings, major plot lines even, may have been altered or omitted entirely. The visual representation clashes with what you've envisioned in your mind. Your experience of the movie is overshadowed by the weight of your disappointment, not because the movie was necessarily bad, but because it wasn't what you imagined based on the book. But now, let's imagine a different scenario. You go to the cinema, knowing little about the story you're about to see unfold. You're engaged, entertained, moved by the narrative, by the performances, etc. You love the movie. Now, you discover there's a book this movie was based on. Curious, you decide to delve into the book. As you read, you're not confronted with the jarring differences, but rather the additional depth. The book brings more context, more backstory, a deeper insight into the character's thoughts and feelings. Your reading experience is enriched by the visuals of the movie, the faces of the actors, the score that touches your soul, the thrilling set pieces that make your heart race. The book isn't lessening the movie experience, it's enhancing it. The movie becomes a guide, lending you its vivid visuals, lending you its talented cast. The characters in the book are no longer faceless entities, but are personified by the actors who portrayed them on screen. The sceneries are not abstract descriptions, but actual visuals that played out on the cinema screens. Your mind isn't left to wander and clash with the depiction on screen, because it was the screen that set the stage for your imagination. Now, let's address the elephant in the room: the changes and omissions in the adaptation. When you've seen the movie first, these are not points of frustration, but moments of discovery. Instead of being irked by the missing subplots, you appreciate their inclusions in the novel. Instead of being upset by the condensed narrative, you relish the opportunity to explore the story in more detail. Watching the 1989 film adaptation of Pet Sematary before delving into the original novel by Stephen King gave me a unique lens through which to interpret the rich narrative laid out in the book. The vivid imagery and haunting performances in the film created a vibrant atmosphere of fear and suspense, a mental storyboard that embellished my reading experience. This sequence of engagement allowed me to appreciate the depth of the characters and the intricate plot details woven into the text without feeling the film fell short, a sentiment that might have surfaced had I approached the film with preconceived notions formed from the book. It offered a harmonious blend of visual stimulation and imaginative interpretation, enriching my overall engagement with the story in both mediums. With all that said, I absolutely declare that watching a movie before reading the book leads to a more enjoyable and enriching experience overall. It turns the frustration of a different adaptation into the joy of enhanced depth. It eliminates the disappointment of unmet expectations and replaces it with the excitement of discovering more about a story you've come to love. We are not always afforded the luxury of choosing the order in which we encounter a story, but when we do, why not consider this alternative approach to the usual? Watch the movie, let it draw you in, let it make you fall in love with the characters, the story, the world it presents. Then pick up the book, immerse yourself in it, let it surprise you, let it enrich what you've already come to know and love. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what storytelling is all about? To surprise us, to move us, to let us explore worlds and live different lives from our own, and to keep us coming back for more? Yes, I think it is. In the shadowed corridors of my anticipation, my mind ventures to the upcoming enigma that is Alien Romulus. I yearn for the return to the primal fear, the creeping dread that once haunted the derelict spaceship on LV-426. In my ideal vision, the screen flickers to life with Newt's family, the Jordans, as their innocent exploration turns to terror as a facehugger springs forth from the crashed ship, setting in motion the horror that would eventually engulf the entire colony, leading to the main conflict of Aliens. It's a scene etched into the lore via the Aliens Special Edition Extended Cut, but by the time Ripley and the Marines arrive on LV-426, the xenomorph infestation is already complete. I want to see the events of said infestation play out. That is what I want Romulus to be. Yet, whispers tell us that Alien Romulus isn't meant to bridge the gap between the seminal chapters directly. So, I pivot my hopes to the fresh nightmares the film could unveil, fulfilling my hopes for a new xenomorph romp in other ways. I hope we get to see the emergence of new xenomorph variants, nightmarish creatures spawned from the dark recesses of early 90s alien media, where comic books and video games and alien action figures stirred a slew of very different breeds of terror, from snake aliens to mantis aliens to gorilla aliens, bat aliens, and more. Give us some of those. Let this film be an ode to the darkness, a canvas painted with the brooding atmosphere of the original masterpiece and the tangible anxiety of the second film. Give me a narrative interlaced with tension so palpable, with stakes as vast as the void of space. Characters should stand as monuments of minimalism, their dialogue sparse but potent, each word a beat in the haunting rhythm of survival. And the music, let there be a score that echoes the haunting melodies of the past, yet carves its own identity. A symphonic entity that breathes in the legacy of Goldsmith and Horner, and exhales something entirely its own. An auditory experience that does not lean on the crutches of Alien or Aliens, but uses them as a launching point. For Alien Romulus, I do not want a retreading of hallowed ground, or a nod to what came before. I ask for a film that stands alone, fierce and unflinching, a new chapter that respects its origins, yet is not afraid to wander into the uncharted territory of our deepest fears. But please, for the love of God, do not wander into the bloated territories of Prometheus or Alien Covenant. Don't even whisper about those movies. Not a wink, not a nod, nothing. That is the Alien Romulus I yearn for personally, in the quiet void of anticipation where hope flickers like a flame in the cosmic winds of LV-426. I have a question for you. When does weird become scary? When does something absurd become unsettling? What happens when comedy converges with fear? And at what point does a whimsical tapestry of family-friendly entertainment, carefully woven with the threads of seemingly innocent make-believe, devolve into a nightmarish sideshow of bizarre imagery and frightening situations? Well, my answer is simple and can be applied to any of these questions. I don't know. And although I am humbled by the vast mysteries of these questions and their apparent lack of definitive answers, my unwavering curiosity fuels my determination to embark on a journey of exploration into the world of the bizarre, with the fervent hope that together we may in fact unravel the enigmas that lie before us. And to do that, I think we need to focus on one of the biggest assailants of the subject matters at hand, a family-friendly comedy that often crosses over into the world of the weird and the unusual, a film that has left an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of audiences for nearly 4 decades, and one that has been one of my favorite movies for almost as long as I've been alive. Today, I would like to talk about the 1985 classic, Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Directed by the innovative Tim Burton, the film is a vibrant and surreal journey through the eccentric life of Pee Wee Herman, played masterfully by the late Paul Reubens. On the surface, Pee-wee's world is a whimsical wonderland filled with colorful characters, playful antics, and a childlike sense of wonder. Yet, as we follow Pee Wee Herman on his quest to recover his beloved stolen bicycle, we encounter moments that defy the conventions of a typical comedy, because within the whimsy of Pee-wee's world lies an undercurrent of darkness that both perplexes and mesmerizes us, prompting the question of why, when, and where this beloved film traverses the fine line between absurdity and terror, where laughter and shivers intertwine, and the unexpected awaits at every twist and turn. When fictional worlds introduce characters and situations that feel strangely unfamiliar, a disconcerting sensation known as the uncanny valley emerges, blurring the line between amusement and discomfort. Even in seemingly lighthearted stories, the infusion of dark or disturbing themes can abruptly shift the tone, creating a jarring and potentially frightening experience for the audience. Sudden changes in pacing and tone, without proper narrative buildup, can disorient and startle viewers. Furthermore, personal interpretations also play a significant role, as different individuals have varying thresholds for what they find amusing or frightening. Consider the infamous Large Marge scene, where Pee Wee Herman hitches a ride with a truck-driving woman whose appearance suddenly transforms into a grotesque and ghostly visage as she recounts a spine-chilling tale of a horrific accident. This abrupt shift from quirkiness to absolute horror leaves the audience startled and bewildered. It's a prime example of how Pee-wee's Big Adventure defies genre boundaries, oscillating between laughter and spine-tingling moments. Furthermore, Pee-wee's Big Adventure features bizarre and nightmarish dream sequences, including an absolutely surreal encounter with bizarre clowns dressed in medical attire, and a disturbing confrontation between Pee-wee's beloved bicycle and a gigantic claymation dinosaur. These surreal moments challenge our expectations and elicit both laughter and unease, blurring the lines between comedy and horror. When you throw other bizarre characters into the mix, such as Madame Ruby, the gang that tries to rob Pee-wee, featuring a cameo by Tim Burton himself, Andy, Mario, and even the likes of Francis, it's hard to deny the uncanny nature of the film. Pee-wee's Big Adventure is a testament to the power of cinematic storytelling to provoke a wide range of emotions. It reminds us that in the realm of horror comedy, or in this case, comedy with bits of horror sprinkled throughout, the boundaries are fluid, and the unexpected is the norm. It's a film that has perplexed and fascinated audiences for generations, leaving us with a lasting impression of the uncanny and the absurd. So, the next time you find yourself laughing at a comedy that takes an unexpected turn into the bizarre or the terrifying, remember that it's all part of the magic of cinema. It's a testament to the rich textile of emotions that films can evoke, and it's a reminder that even in the world of laughter, there's room for a few little shivers running down your spine. And as we continue to explore the strange and surreal in cinema, we may never fully answer the question of when comedy truly converges with fear, but we can certainly enjoy the wild and unpredictable ride it takes us on. And Pee-wee's Big Adventure is a great example of this. Do you want to hear something really strange? I spent the better part of 25 years absolutely hating the 1993 film Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. As a wide-eyed 6-year-old in that crowded theater back in 1993, my initial encounter with the film was anything but pleasant. In fact, it was an experience that bred a visceral hatred that persisted for nearly 3 decades. However, my feelings towards this movie took an unexpected turn around 2017 or 2018 when I found myself thinking, wait a minute, I don't hate this movie. I love this movie. But why? Why did I have such a strong disdain for the film in the first place? What triggered this startling transformation of sentiment, where thunderous rage-embraced loathing mutated into absolute adoration? Was it a suppressed appreciation that had been hiding in plain sight all along? A cinematic diamond in the rough that I only thought I despised? Or was it merely a result of my long-term exposure to the film? An exposure that eventually developed into a strange and insane form of cinematic Stockholm Syndrome? Today, I would like to embark on a journey, an exploration of these questions, and together, we'll delve into my tumultuous relationship with Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday, and attempt to unravel the mysteries of my incomprehensible change of heart, a change of heart so rotten and black and disgusting that you could take a bite right out of it. Jason Goes to Hell was released in 1993 under the creative vision of Adam Marcus, who served as both the writer and director of the film. Sean S. Cunningham, the original creator of the franchise, returned to the series after a very long absence, this time as a producer. The film marked New Line Cinema's first venture with the iconic Jason character, after acquiring the rights from Paramount Pictures, though they could not use the specific title of Friday the 13th. In Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday, Jason Voorhees, the living, breathing essence of evil, is tracked down and blown to bits by a special FBI task force, with everybody thereafter now assuming he's finally dead. But everybody assumes wrong. Jason is soon reborn with the bone-chilling ability to assume the identity of anyone he transfers his soul into, using a demonic parasite as the vessel that he pukes up and forces into the other person's body. From that point forward, the terrifying truth is Jason Voorhees could in fact be anywhere, or anybody. In this shocking blood-soaked supposed finale to Jason's carnage-ridden terror, the horrible secrets of his unstoppable killing instinct is finally revealed, and it is up to a bounty hunter named Creighton Duke to end the horror of Jason Voorhees once and for all, at least for the sake of this very self-contained movie. I saw Jason Goes to Hell in theaters with my mom and her then-boyfriend Zach when the film first came out back in 1993. I was 6 years old, going on 7, was already a huge Jason Voorhees fan, believe it or not, and was absolutely confused when Jason got blown up at the beginning of the movie. I remember turning to my mom and asking her if the movie was over once the opening credit sequence started rolling. I just couldn't fathom that they literally just blew up Jason, yet there was still more movie left to be seen. The ensuing rest of the film was a blur of astonishment and bafflement. As a 6-year-old, I struggled to grasp, comprehend, or even decide if I liked what I saw. My mom and her boyfriend echoed my sentiments of confusion during our ride home, especially given the stark contrast to the preceding film, Jason Takes Manhattan. The narrative of Jason Goes to Hell just felt so unexpected and out of place. I remember talking with my friends at school, those who had seen the film too at least, which is weird thinking back to now since we were all basically in 1st or 2nd grade at the time, I believe, and there was quite a few of us who had already seen the film in theaters with our folks. The early 90s were just a different era for parenting, I suppose. Anyways, they too were just as confused as I was about the film itself. Did we like it? Did we hate it? What the hell was going on with it exactly? I still wasn't sure, personally, but I understood that I would rather watch any other Jason movie than watch The Final Friday again, at least until the film hit VHS and the bowels of hell would call me back for another helping. I rented the film from Videoland and came to the realization that I didn't quite enjoy it. It was too weird, too different, and too disconnected from what had come prior. The narrative felt out of place, almost as if several movies were missing between Jason Takes Manhattan and Jason Goes to Hell. As a matter of fact, I remember searching through Videoland for Jason movies I may have somehow missed, as well as asking friends if there were any other Friday the 13th sequels I might have overlooked. Clearly, there weren't. Jason Goes to Hell really just was this weird and out-of-nowhere supposed final entry that sort of just stuck out from the rest of the franchise like a big, sore thumb. Even the scene where Freddy's glove springs out from the ground and drags Jason's hockey mask down into hell didn't sit right with me, especially because it lacked Robert Englund's distinctive laugh. To me, the whole movie just felt off. Jason Goes to Hell was just off, and off was the best way I could describe my feelings on the matter at that time. Yet strangely enough, I found myself renting it again and again over the subsequent years, not because I loved it, but because I was determined to pinpoint my exact grievances with it. Why wasn't it appealing to me? What would I have changed about it? What were they thinking when they made this movie? As time went on, and I even acquired a VHS copy of my own, my questions persisted, alongside my odd compulsions to revisit the film for seemingly no reason. The inner conflict I felt about Jason Goes to Hell persisted for quite some time, eventually evolving into a deep disdain for the film. This animosity grew exponentially once we had quote-unquote better sequels to choose from, such as Jason X and Freddy vs. Jason, which both released about a decade or so after the final Friday. The conflicting information provided by both Sean S. Cunningham and Adam Marcus, at least at that point in time, only added fuel to the fire. It became evident that their accounts on the matter clashed, especially concerning the film's tumultuous production. I held a deep contempt for the film for several more years, and even though I reduced the frequency with which I watched it, I found myself irresistibly drawn back to it, despite my vocal criticisms. This pattern persisted well into my 20s, and it wasn't until some point between 2015 and 2018, in my later 20s, that I had a sudden revelation. I didn't despise Jason Goes to Hell at all. In fact, I absolutely adored it. I loved Jason's bloated, bubbly, toxic Avenger look. I loved the cheesy synth sounds of Manfredini's early 90s original score. I loved the body jumping, the demonoid tongue-kissing soul transfers, the over-the-top gore and violence, the weird naked shaving, the memorably weird cast, and the bombastic presence of bounty hunter Creighton Duke. I didn't hate these things at all. In fact, I loved all of it. Everything I thought I despised about the final Friday was suddenly turned completely on its head, and for the first time in years, well, for the first time ever really, I could sit back, watch Jason Goes to Hell, and allow myself to enjoy every blood-soaked and over-the-top moment of it, from the sudden appearance of Jason's half-sister to the misspelled Voorhees name on the mailbox. I could enjoy, embrace, and find comfort in Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. But was this sudden realization an organic and authentic change of heart, or was it some kind of subconscious form of Stockholm Syndrome? That was the question. With all that said, I think nostalgia played a significant role in transforming my view of Jason Goes to Hell. Over the years, the memories of watching the film as a child, discussing it with friends, and even my initial confusion gradually became infused with a fondness for the past. This sentimental value reshaped my viewing experience, turning what was once a source of disappointment into a cherished memory, an integral part of my childhood. Simultaneously, as I aged, I developed a broader perspective on films and art. I began to appreciate Jason Goes to Hell for its daring departure from the norm, recognizing the creativity behind its narrative choices and the boldness in its execution. I came to understand that art isn't just about meeting expectations, but can also be about challenging them. My understanding deepened as I learned more about the film's production, the conflicting visions of Sean S. Cunningham and Adam Marcus, and the challenges they faced. This knowledge shifted my perspective, adding a layer of respect and appreciation for what they had accomplished, despite the odds. It also led me to ponder the concept of cinematic Stockholm Syndrome. Could it be that my repeated viewings, initially out of a desire to understand why I disliked it, eventually made the film endearing to me? Was this transformation in perception a result of familiarity breeding affection? This thought suggests that our relationships with films can be as complex and dynamic as our relationships with people, evolving and changing over time. In the end, my journey with Jason Goes to Hell became a profound reflection of my personal growth. This journey taught me to appreciate not just the film, but the very process of allowing my perceptions to evolve. Once a symbol of disappointment, the film now stands as a testament to the dynamic nature of our tastes, which are as ever-changing as we are as people. It has taught me the beauty of evolving tastes, serving as a reminder that our opinions, particularly about art, are never set in stone. They are fluid, capable of transforming in ways we might never have anticipated. The film, once considered a low point in a franchise I held dear, has now become a cherished classic, loved for all its quirks and bold narrative choices. So, as I conclude this journey into my sudden change of heart regarding The Final Friday, it's clear that my relationship with Jason Goes to Hell has been a journey of rediscovery, not just of the film, but of myself. It's a path that highlights the transformative power of time and experience, reminding us that sometimes the things we initially dislike can evolve into things we love, provided we give them and ourselves the opportunity to grow. Thank you all for joining me in exploring my tumultuous relationship with Jason Goes to Hell The Final Friday. This experience has been a revelation in itself, leading me to understand this incomprehensible change of heart, a change so profound, it feels like I'm taking a bite right out of it. As a fervent enthusiast of the Alien saga, I've long admired the intricate layers of fear and survival woven throughout the series. Alien 3, in particular, stands as a divisive yet bold chapter, a film that I hold in high regard for its daring narrative and atmospheric depth. Its two cuts, the theatrical and the assembly, offer distinct visions of a bleak universe, ripe with existential dread and raw storytelling. However, the film's handling of certain characters sparks a deep-seated contention. It's a dichotomy of admiration and profound disappointment, particularly with the fates of Hicks, Newt, and Bishop. Their abrupt demise as we crash land with Ripley onto Fiorina 161 feels like a narrative betrayal, a gutting departure from the rich character development we experienced previously in Aliens. Focusing on Newt, her character arc is the most disheartening aspect to revisit. She was the embodiment of innocence amidst the chaos, a beacon of resilience and hope. The child who survived the horrors of LV-426 and clung to Ripley as a newfound protector met an undignified end, one that still resonates with a sense of injustice within the fan base. The unsettling autopsy scene, though not overtly graphic, is an affront to her character. A final, morbid punctuation that sealed her fate in a manner unworthy of the survivor we had come to champion. The decision to kill Newt off-screen and dissect her in such a manner feels like a creative misstep, a disservice not only to the character, but to the audience who had rooted for her. It was as if the film wanted to force Ripley back into a corner, alone against the xenomorph threat, yet it did so by undermining the relational depth and the emotional continuity established in Aliens. It was a narrative choice that still evokes a visceral reaction from fans, as it stripped away a layer of humanity that the franchise had fought hard to preserve. Alien 3, for all its atmospheric excellence and thematic bravery, faltered in its duty to its characters, especially to Newt. Her premature end robbed her of a narrative that should have been richly explored, of the future she could have had. This was a girl who personified the horrors and strength found in the fight for survival. Her death, particularly its off-screen nature and the subsequent autopsy, feels like a creative injustice that turned a survivor into a mere stepping stone for further plot development. It's in this aspect that Alien 3 falters most significantly for me. Despite my appreciation for the film's stark representation of Ripley's relentless fight and its exploration into the psyche of the isolated and the broken, it's hard to reconcile with the narrative's disregard for characters that had become so integral to the story. The betrayal of Newt, especially, remains a sore point. She was more than a character. She was a symbol of the franchise's underlying theme of maternal protection and the loss of innocence in the face of an uncaring universe. The child who had overcome so much, who had formed a familial bond with Ripley, deserved more than an off-screen death and a posthumous appearance on an autopsy table. Her end was not just a death, but a shattering of the emotional investment we, as an audience, had placed in her journey. This isn't just about a character's death, it's about the narrative's integrity. It's about honoring the progression of characters who've been through hell and back. Newt's death in Alien 3 feels like a betrayal because it didn't just rob her of a future, it robbed the audience of the chance to see a beloved character continue to fight, grow, and perhaps eventually even find peace. Now, as a parent myself, the resonance of Newt's loss in Alien 3 takes on a profoundly deeper significance. The bond between Ripley and Newt was more than a mere narrative device. It was a reflection of a fundamental human connection, one that transcends the screen and nestles into the very reality of our lives. As a father, I see not just a fictional child or a character in peril, but the embodiment of my own daughters, my own flesh and blood. The protective instinct that Ripley embodies speaks to me on an elemental level, and I'm sure for all the other parents out there, you can agree. This deepened perspective makes the handling of Newt's character all the more tragic. The autopsy scene is no longer a distant act of fiction. It's a nightmarish situation that stirs a visceral dread akin to the thought of any harm befalling one's own child. It's a grim reminder of the vulnerability and preciousness of our own children, a stark, unwelcome intrusion of one of life's greatest fears. Such a scene, and Newt's demise, is felt with an intensified acuteness that perhaps only a parent can fully understand. The fiction of Alien 3 thus weaves itself into the fabric of our parental consciousness, making the loss of Newt not just a point of contention for fans, but a personal, haunting echo of every parent's silent dread. The film, while a masterpiece in its own right, will forever carry the weight of this decision. In its attempt to strip down to the core elements of Ripley's solitary battle, it inadvertently stripped away a part of its heart. And for many of us, that is a loss that is felt just as keenly as the characters themselves. Newt, Hicks, and Bishop, they were the emotional anchors, and their absence is a void that Alien 3 cannot fill, despite its other achievements. We understand the intent, but we mourn the execution, and we carry the memory of what could have been had they survived, especially that of young Newt. In the annals of horror cinema, Few characters have achieved the iconic status of Jason Voorhees, the masked murderer from the Friday the 13th franchise. His transformation into what fans affectionately refer to as Zombie Jason marks a fascinating pivot in the series' mythology, beginning with Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. This transformation, however, is inextricably linked to the actions of one Tommy Jarvis. Initially introduced as a child in Friday the 13th, the final chapter, Tommy Jarvis evolves from a victim to a hero, seemingly putting an end to Jason's reign of terror once and for all. But it is in Part 6 that Tommy's narrative takes a consequential turn. Distraught and driven by fear and the trauma inflicted upon him by his past encounters with Jason, Tommy exhumes Jason's corpse in a bid to cremate it and ensure Jason can never return to continue his murderous spree. The plan is dramatically derailed when a lightning strike, a deus ex machina in the truest sense, reanimates Jason's lifeless body. Thus, Tommy inadvertently transforms Jason from a corporeal serial killer into an undead, seemingly invincible force. This marks the beginning of Zombie Jason and a shift in the series from slasher horror to supernatural slasher horror. Tommy Jarvis's legacy within the Friday the 13th franchise is more than the sum of his missteps. It's a testament to the complexity of human intentionality clashing with the supernatural. His character arc, which spans multiple films, becomes an exploration of guilt and the human psyche's response to extreme stress. In the universe where Jason exists, Tommy's actions create a ripple effect that extends beyond the immediate consequences of reanimating an unstoppable killer. It's this psychological nuance that enriches the series and offers commentary on the broader human condition, where our deepest fears can manifest into self-fulfilling prophecies, and our attempts to rectify past traumas can unwittingly give them new, more formidable life. In a meta sense, the inadvertently resurrected Jason became a symbol for the franchise's own resistance to finality. Each installment after Tommy's fateful decision can be seen as a reflection on the horror genre's propensity for reviving its monsters, regardless of narrative finality. The audience's thirst for horror is as unquenchable as Jason's thirst for vengeance, leading to a symbiotic relationship between the viewer's expectations and the franchise's deliverables. The Zombie Jason era is thus a mirror, reflecting the genre's evolution from isolated slashers to complex, multi-film narratives with characters whose histories and motivations are as intricate as the lore surrounding the monsters they battle. From this point on, Jason no longer operates under the pretense of human limitations. Zombie Jason forges ahead through sequels and crossovers, from the depths of Crystal Lake in Part 7, The New Blood, to the streets of Manhattan in Jason Takes Manhattan, through the bizarre body hopping of Jason Goes to Hell, to the sci-fi infused Jason X, and the crossover Freddy vs. Jason. Each installment ups the ante with Jason shrugging off what would be fatal to any mere mortal, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. The irony of Tommy Jarvis's actions is palpable. In attempting to put a definitive end to the fear and violence that Jason represented, Tommy inadvertently becomes the catalyst for a new, more terrifying chapter. He transforms a simple serial killer into a myth, a legend that seems to defy death itself. This twist of fate makes Tommy an unwitting architect of the horror that unfolds in the subsequent films. Tommy Jarvis, portrayed by different actors over his arc in the franchise, becomes a tragic figure, a man whose intentions, however well meant, led to catastrophic outcomes. His character serves as a cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of attempting to control fate. It's a stark reminder that in the universe of horror, attempts to bury the past can sometimes give it new life. The legend of Zombie Jason, perpetuated by Tommy's fateful decision, continues to captivate horror fans and serves as a testament to the enduring appeal of the Friday the 13th franchise. The character's evolution from mortal to immortal horror icon speaks to our collective fascination with the macabre and the unstoppable nature of true evil. In the realm of horror, some monsters simply refuse to stay dead, and sometimes it's the heroes who, in trying to end the nightmare, inadvertently ensure its survival. The introduction of supernatural elements through Tommy's actions also expanded the franchise's universe, allowing for crossovers and new storytelling opportunities that would have been impossible with a more grounded antagonist. With Zombie Jason, the films could venture into territories that blended horror with fantasy, science fiction, and even the metaphysical. This elevation of Jason to a near-elemental force of destruction allowed for creative liberties in how he interacted with the world around him, how he could be challenged, and ultimately how his story could be continued or concluded in innovative ways. Tommy Jarvis's mistake, in essence, served as a narrative bridge that took the Friday the 13th from its slasher roots into the broader realm of horror mythology. In closing, I would like to thank myself for making such a cool meme that inspired this entire video, a meme I made several years back, and a meme you've probably seen circulating in horror groups and horror forums over the last several years. Long live Zombie Jason, and way to go, Tommy Jarvis. For over a quarter of a century, I've held a conviction that remains unshaken. Puppet Master 4 and 5 are the pinnacle of the Puppet Master series, a sentiment that still holds true today. Sure, the original Puppet Master carved its niche in horror history, and parts 2 and 3 absolutely have their merits, especially part 3, but it's the 4th and 5th installments that truly capture the essence of what makes this series special for me. They offer some of the richest stories and some of the most well-crafted characters in the series, and while that may sound like an easy feat to accomplish, given the objective decline in quality after part 5, it's important to remember that when you're discussing Puppet Master as a whole, you're contending with Puppet Master 3 no matter how you slice it, which contains heavy hitters like Guy Rolfe, Richard Lynch, and Sarah Douglas, whose performances in that movie were inarguably brilliant. So yes, when I say Puppet Master 4 and 5 are right up there with 3 as far as memorable characters go, I'm not just saying that lightly. But the characters on display in Puppet Master 4 and 5 are just too damn memorable. But let's be honest, if we were discussing acting chops alone, Puppet Master 3 would eat every other entry in this franchise. But anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about Puppet Master 4. Released in 1993 and directed by Jeff Burr, this film takes a bold step. It transformed the puppets from bad guys into protectors, battling demonic forces from the netherworld. It's set in a reality where the boundary between science and magic blurs, where a young prodigy and his friends encounter the wrath of underworld demons. This installment breathes life into the puppets in a way that's both thrilling and deeply engaging. The introduction of the Decapitron puppet and the return of Andre Toulon via puppet are also pure genius, and once again played by Guy Rolfe, mind you. In Puppet Master 4, we dive into a narrative that seamlessly intertwines the realms of the supernatural and the scientific. The protagonist, Rick Myers, is a young man of immense talent, straddling the world of advanced AI and the mystical secrets left behind by Andre Toulon. The puppets, under Toulon's lingering guidance, shifts from their haunting origins to become guardians of their new friends, rather than slashers. This unexpected role reversal is not just a twist in the plot, it's a redefinition of the entire series. It challenges our perceptions of these iconic characters, taking us on a journey that's as much about self-discovery as it is about fighting off the demonic totems prowling around the Bodega Bay Inn. Then there's Puppet Master 5, which continues the narrative with the same intensity and creativity. This 1994 sequel, also directed by Jeff Burr, encapsulates the evolution of the series. It's more than just a horror flick. It's a story about legacy and about the battle against otherworldly forces. Watching Rick Myers take on the mantle as the new Puppet Master, rallying the puppets, and defending against the King Totem makes for a gripping story. The way these films blend horror with a sense of adventure and dark fantasy is unparalleled. The film escalates the conflict with the introduction of Sutek's own life essence-infused totem, the aforementioned King Totem, raising the stakes to all new levels. The sequel doesn't just follow up on its predecessor, it expands the narrative scope, exploring themes of power, responsibility, and the fine line between human and puppet. I love these two movies, and yet I still want the Puppet Master trilogy that could have been, but never was, the Puppet Wars trilogy, a concept that promised to be epic, but tragically, it never materialized due to financial constraints. The idea of revisiting the Puppet Master universe and expanding it into a larger battlefield of supernatural forces remains one of the great unfulfilled promises in low-budget, straight-to-video horror cinema. But alas, I digress. Puppet Master 4 and 5 stand as testaments to the creative heights the Puppet Master series achieved. They encapsulated everything great about the Puppet Master universe, the intrigue, the horror, the unexpected twists and turns. They are, without a doubt, the best of the series, blending the lore's depth with cinematic excitement. These films didn't just entertain, they expanded the scope of what a low-budget, straight-to-video horror franchise could be, and for that, they'll always hold a special place in the hearts of fans, and truly should have been the end of the franchise overall, because after Puppet Master 5, the franchise really went downhill. Gather round as we delve into the depths of what is arguably one of the best horror sequels in the annals of horror history. At least within the Child's Play franchise. Yes, I'm talking about Child's Play 3. A film that not only continues the terrifying legacy of its predecessors, but also stands as a monument to the Chucky saga. So prepare yourselves, because what I'm about to unfold will absolutely flip your lunch tray, taking you on a roller coaster of emotions, terror, and sheer cinematic brilliance. Let's start at the very beginning, the opening scene, set in a desolate doll factory years after the chaos of Child's Play 2, amongst the remnants of Chucky's last stand. Then, in a twist of fate, while workers are trying to remove the molten remains of Chucky's melted visage, a hefty amount of the killer doll's blood, still trapped within its plastic form, leaks out into a vat of molten plastic, and thus, our antagonist is reborn once again. This moment, culminating in Chucky's anguished scream of no, is nothing short of cinematic gold. It's a scream that echoes the despair of Charles Lee Ray, trapped once again within the confines of a plastic prison, setting the stage for the absolute bloodbath that's about to unfold. Now let's talk about that delicious irony of the introductory death sequence. Our dear Chucky, wasting no time, sets his sights on the head of the doll company, the man indirectly responsible for his resurrection in both Child's Play 2 and this film, thus making his death feel poetic and ironic, and almost like a small glimmer of frontier justice for Andy and everybody else killed in Child's Play 2 and 3.
Dana, doo-doo loves movies. Dana, doo-doo loves movies.
What's up, dudes and dudettes? My name's Cody, and I'm just a dude who loves movies. And today, my friend over at TobattoVision, Brandon, has asked me to talk a little bit about Child's Play 3. Now, Child's Play 3 has been known as kind of the black sheep of the franchise for ever since it's come out, since 1991. And I don't quite understand, because this has always been one of my favorites in the franchise, and so many people look down on it. Even Brad Dourif himself said this is his least favorite one. Even though Child's Play 3 takes place 8 years after Child's Play 2, it was actually released in theaters 9 months after Child's Play 2. So this was a quick turnaround, and writer and creator Don Mancini was under a lot of pressure by Universal Studios. With Child's Play 3 taking that 8-year jump into the future, that means that we have to age our Andy, because last time we saw him 9 months earlier, he was 8-9 years old, so now he has to age to be 16-17. So that right there was really something people did not like. They did not like the recasting of Andy, an older Andy, but it makes sense in the story. Now Andy's in this military school because he's just had this horrible life caused by Chucky in the last 2 Child's Play films. So with the new setting of Kent Military School, that gives Chucky a new playground to play with new toys, with new victims like Winehurst, De Silva, Shelton. There's even a kooky barber who's obsessed with hair. Presto, you're bald. In my opinion, I think Child's Play 3 has the best opening / first act of the franchise. I love the whole board meeting scene where they bring back Sullivan, the CEO, played by Peter Haskell. He wants that good guy doll back on the shelves because it is their #1 seller. Play Palace has just now got back on their feet. There's this one board member that does not want this to happen. He's telling all the facts. He's like, hey, this could be this big negative thing, but the bottom line is, it's the bottom line. Fun fact, back in the early 80s, Don Mancini worked as a cord runner on a soap opera. On the set of the soap opera, he said nobody on set was nice to him. They were all rude except for one person. And he told himself when he got to the point where he can, hire actors, he was going to. And that person was the guy who played Sullivan, which is Peter Haskell. So I love that, because you never know who's going to be your boss. So always treat people the same. Treat the custodian the same as you would the CEO, and the CEO the same you would as the custodian. When we talk about Child's Play 3, you can't forget to mention the one-liners. I think Child's Play 3 has a bunch of great one-liners. I gotta get out of this body. My Andy, how have you grown? Chucky's gonna be your bro. And my favorite, don't fuck with the Chuck. Another fun fact as well, Child's Play 2 and Child's Play 3 has this connection. So the actress who plays Miss Kettlewell from Child's Play 2, her husband in real life is actually in Child's Play 3. He plays the security guard at the carnival. The more you know. Child's Play 3 has a really strong third act. Now, it's nowhere near the third act of Child's Play 2 with the factory scene, but this one is pretty cool. You can tell that they were trying to do something special with the carnival scene and, getting his face chopped off. It has iconic looks of Chucky as well with the pizza face. That is an iconic look. And when I was a little kid, I used to always think that Chucky looked the scariest in #2, but actually, I think it's Child's Play 3. This doll looks mean and vicious, really. As a lifelong Child's Play and Chucky fan, Child's Play 3 does hold a near and dear spot in my heart. Back in 1988, they had a test screening of the original Child's Play. And during this test screening, they were showing the scene of the elderly couple in the elevator. In this scene, when the elderly couple leaves, the older lady tells her husband, "Oh, what an ugly doll." Chucky then replies as the elevator's going up as, "Fuck you." Well, that scene got a huge laugh, and the execs were listening, and they were like, okay, this really worked. So when Child's Play 2 came along, they sprinkled in more comedy. And then Child's Play 3, they did even more comedy. And Child's Play 3, I feel like, has that sweet spot of horror with comedy, where now in the franchise it's more of like a comedy with horror. So I feel like, in my humble opinion, this was the last of the great Chucky of my generation. Now, I love the whole franchise, the good, the bad, and the not so great. I like them all. I'm a big fan of the franchise, still am, and I always will be. I love the TV show. But Child's Play 3 is an end of an era. And that's why I love Child's Play 3 so much. And I don't think it deserves the hate that it gets. And I'm glad people are now coming around to it and they're giving it a second look. And it's not as bad as they thought it was. And there's a lot of charm and a lot to enjoy in this movie. And so if you are still negative on Child's Play 3 and you haven't seen it in a while, give it a rewatch. See if your opinion changes. It may not. But I love this movie and I always will. I'd like to thank Brandon of TobattoVision for having me be part of this video. He knows that I love Child's Play and I love to talk Chucky. Don't forget to roundhouse kick that like button, comment and subscribe. Cheers, who's respecting. Have a great day. Back to you, Brandon. Ooh.
Transitioning to the military school setting, Child's Play 3 breaks new ground, moving away from the urban and suburban backdrops of the first two films. This setting introduces an element of discipline and structure, a stark contrast to the chaos that Chucky inevitably brings. It's a refreshing change that adds a new layer of tension and unpredictability to the narrative. And while many fans have cited the movie's setting as a negative, I absolutely love the location. The casting of this film is nothing short of brilliant, as far as the Child's Play movie is concerned. Brad Dourif, as always, with his unparalleled voice work, brings Chucky to life in a way that only he can. Justin Whalen's portrayal of Andy Barclay shows a character who has grown, yet still carries the scars of his past. Travis Fiennes, as Lieutenant Colonel Brett C. Sheldon, stands out as one of horror's most memorable antagonists, at least as far as I'm concerned. The supporting cast, including Perry Reeves, Andrew Robinson, and Jeremy Silvers, complement the narrative beautifully, each adding depth to the unfolding drama. Presto, you're bald. And then there's the original score by Corey Lirios and John D'Andrea. If there's any soundtrack in the Chucky franchise that can be called a masterpiece, it's this one. The music in Child's Play 3 is not just background noise, it's an integral part of the storytelling, enhancing the suspense and elevating the horror to new heights, and adding a layer of menace and maturity to the film's violent tone that was simply not present in the previous two films.
What's up, everybody? Garrett back here from Born to Be Rad, and what we're going to talk about today is 1991's Child's Play 3. Now, man, I guess this movie gets a lot of hate. I didn't realize that because this is one of the best Child's Play movies in the series. In my opinion, my favorites are the first three. Once you get into the Chucky stuff, to me that just feels totally different. This is the Chucky that I grew up with, and these are the Chucky movies that I love, are the Child's Play ones. And I can remember as a kid seeing this at my grandmother's house. I didn't see it in theaters. Sort of my grandmother, she used to have like pay-per-view, so we could see a lot of these movies really early when they got released. And Child's Play 3 was one of them. And I remember checking this thing out, and my brother and I were totally freaked out, especially by the scene with the paintballs where all of a sudden it became real bullets. We were completely freaked out by that. The one thing that's still stuck in my head is when he's playing with that little kid Tyler, and the guy comes in the room and he goes, "What are you doing in here?" And the kid Tyler says, "We're playing hide the soul." It just sounds so random, and my brother and I used to say that all the time. "What are you doing?" "We're playing hide the soul." It's so funny. And guys, Child's Play 3, like, look at this cover for this VHS. This is nostalgic, and it says right here, "Look who's stalking. They're always a good time to put away childhood things, but some won't stay put." So guys, if you are not a fan of Child's Play 3, it just takes a different turn on the Child's Play franchise being in the military setting. I just think it's really cool and different. So guys, if you haven't seen Child's Play 3 in a while, I highly recommend going to give it another try. Now, this is Garrett at Born to Be Rad, and like always, stay rad.
As far as Chucky himself goes, he's never been more determined than he is in Child's Play 3, at least up until this point. This isn't just another killing spree, it's a straight-up mission. Chucky's character evolution is on full display here as well, showcasing not just a doll possessed by a serial killer, but a complex character driven by vengeance, desperation, and an insatiable thirst for freedom from his plastic body. And who could forget the climactic third act of the carnival? Visually stunning, this setting provides the perfect backdrop for the final showdown between Chucky and his adversaries. His demise in the giant fan blades of the dark ride is not just gruesomely awesome, it's a fitting end to his newest rampage, full of symbolic weight and visual spectacle. In closing, Child's Play 3 is not just a fantastic horror film and a fantastic horror sequel. It is the perfect example of the enduring appeal of the Child's Play franchise at large, which still continues on to this very day. It respects the foundations laid by its predecessors, while daring to venture into new territories, both thematically and narratively. For those of us who have grown old and folded alongside these films, it's a nostalgic trip down memory lane, reminding us about why we fell in love with this genre in the first place. And I should know because I saw Child's Play 3 in theaters when I was 4 years old, and that's a fact.
So Brandon's enlisting the help of the big guns to talk about Child's Play 3. Now, it's easy to criticize movies like this, you know. Can you say that Child's Play 3 feels a little rushed and things like that? That's probably fair. But context is key, as the great Eric Bischoff has always said. Child's Play 3 came out damn near immediately after 2, because 2 was such a smash success. We had Chucky going over Universal after MGM was like, we don't want none, take them back. And, you know, with the success of that, they really did rush Child's Play 3. But with that rushness, there's so much charm to it, and you could almost look at scenes that would have played out probably in a certain way, come out completely different, that could have been a time-related thing, and actually makes the film more charming than it probably even should be. One of my favorite scenes in Child's Play 3 is definitely when Chucky has the lipstick on his face and he's going to attack the Colonel, and the Colonel straight up has a heart attack and dies without Chucky even touching him. And Chucky, of course, has this great iconic line, "You gotta be fucking kidding me." That really works for me. And then you've got, you know, the new Andy in this film with the young kid, Tyler, and I like that. It's kind of like a throwback to keep things the way they were with the first two movies, with obviously young Andy, because in this movie Andy's older, and I like that because honestly I don't think having just late teen, whatever age he was, Andy as like our main protagonist would have worked enough. So having young Tyler in here definitely keys things back to the previous two films, which I really like. And, you know, another thing about Part 3 that I think is great, I've been vocal saying that, you know, the endings of Part 2 and Part 1 are incredible, but the truth is, you got to look at the ending of Part 3 as well, because when you look at the ending of Child's Play 3, you're going to see an incredible ending. As a matter of fact, I think it's the best part of the film, where you've got Chucky in the haunted roller coaster haunted house, which is something I've never seen before till this day either, which is so freaking cool. And you get this iconic shot of Chucky after his face gets cut off by the propeller. And it's about as iconic as damn near anything in the Child's Play franchise, and it's a hell of an ending. But one of my favorite parts of the entire series takes place in Part 3, and it's the opening of Part 3. We see this run-down, morbid factory. It's covered in cobwebs and dust, and this crane picks up this amorphous blob, basically the results that we would see from the end of Part 2, and lift this thing up, and when it does, blood starts dripping out, gets into the pool of the plastic vat, whatever that is, and starts spinning, and you get this iconic look of the blood and that clay and whatever spinning around, and then we get this creepy shot. This haunted me as a kid, where you see the shell of a Child's Play doll head with no eyes, no teeth, nothing, scream no as we zoom into the mouth. And that has haunted my dreams as a kid for years, and it's my favorite opening, I think, of the entire series. So I think there's a lot to like about Child's Play 3, and again, you know, this is a movie that came out, I think it was like 9 or 10 months after Part 2. So you got to give it some credit. Like I said, context is key. There are things about the film that clearly seem fast or rushed, but 9 months is 9 months to make a movie, and I actually think it gives it charm, and there are things about Part 3 that I absolutely adore as much as anything else in the series. So, good old CHH says Child's Play 3 is a damn good Child's Play film.
Big thanks to Cody, Garrett, and Christian for jumping on the video. And for all my fellow horror enthusiasts out there, I strongly encourage you to revisit Child's Play 3 with a very fresh pair of eyes. Appreciate its contributions to the genre at large, its depth, its character development, and, most importantly, a reminder that there's nothing like a little strangulation to get the circulation going. In the enigmatic and often chilling realm of horror movies, the iconic figure of Michael Myers from the Halloween series stands as a paragon of terror. However, a particularly intriguing tale arises from Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, a narrative that twists expectations with its behind-the-scenes mask chaos. This chapter not only heralded the return of the nefarious Myers, but also brought to light a spectrum of mask variations, one of which being the so-called pink mask with blonde hair that has stirred considerable conversation for quite some time. Delving into the saga of the Michael Myers mask, especially with regard to Halloween 4, it's essential to note the origins of this horror icon. The mask originally was a modified Captain Kirk mask from Star Trek, painted white to create an unnervingly blank and haunting visage that has lingered in the collective nightmare of audiences since 1978. By the time 1988 rolled around, and Halloween 4 was set to unleash Myers once more, there was an earnest effort to recapture the chilling aura of the original mask. However, what unfolded was a bizarre twist that added an unexpectedly fascinating chapter to the film's legend. The mask, dubbed the Pink Mask, became a standout oddity of the film, momentarily shifting the sinister air surrounding Myers into something peculiarly eye-catching. This production snafu, far from a mere oversight, has become a topic of fascination among horror fans for decades. Contrary to its nickname, however, this mask was not actually pink, but flesh-colored with blonde hair, resembling the standard William Shatner mask, yet it appeared unmistakably pink within the movie's cinematography. Due to an ordering mix-up, the production team ended up with a mask far removed from the intimidating presence typically associated with Michael Myers. The appearance of this pink mask in the final cut of Halloween 4 was a result of the relentless pressures and constraints inherent in film production. Certain scenes were filmed before the error was identified, and the constraints of budget and timeline made reshooting these portions unfeasible. Consequently, astute viewers received a rare sighting of Myers in a guise that was both startling and bizarre, prompting a second glance at the so-called pink mask. What elevates this incident from a simple mistake to an integral part of the Halloween mythos is how this pink mask has garnered its own cult following. It embodies the unpredictability and charm of movie making, where errors can endear a film to its audience in unanticipated ways. For aficionados who treasure every detail of the Michael Myers masks in Halloween 4, and there are quite a few of them, including but not limited to the enigmatic pink mask, this trivia isn't merely intriguing, it's an enthralling glimpse into the unpredictable world of filmmaking. It highlights how deviations from the plan can become as defining to a film's identity as the elements that work as intended. Whether it's the classic chilling white mask or its peculiar pink counterpart, each version donned by Myers in Halloween 4 contributes to the intricate mosaic that defines this horror juggernaut. All hail Halloween 4, and all hail the pink mask. Let me just say that right now, I'm hanging on the edge of my seat for Ghostbusters 5, hoping it gets greenlit after the seemingly mixed reaction from fans and critics alike regarding Frozen Kingdom. When it comes to Ghostbusters, those first two films, man, the original Ghostbusters and its 1989 sequel, they're not just films to me. They're like these sacred pieces of pop culture that perfectly nailed the whole mix of laughs, scares, and wholesome, heartfelt fun. And let's just say the 2016 reboot did not quite hit the mark for me. But Afterlife? That was like a beacon of light. Finally, a sequel that felt right. At least, somewhat right, I should say. Then Frozen Empire came out and kicked things up a notch, stoking the fires for what could come next. And though it still didn't quite reach the epic heights of the original two films, it came way closer in tone, spirit, and atmosphere than Afterlife ever did. Now, with the prospect of Ghostbusters V on the horizon, what I'm really craving is a return to the core of what made Ghostbusters so magical in the first place. It's gotta be back in New York City once again, as it was in Frozen Kingdom. NYC through and through, that's a must for me. That city isn't just a setting, am I right? It's a part of the Ghostbusters DNA, and that cannot be understated. NYC is as much a part of Ghostbusters as Slimer is, am I right? But here's the kicker. I want the spotlight firmly fixed on our original heroes, Ernie Hudson's Winston, Dan Aykroyd's Ray, and Bill Murray's Venkman. Their quick appearances in Afterlife were just a tease, glorified cameos at best, and while Frozen Empire gave us a lot more of them, it still just wasn't enough. In the next film, I want these guys front and center, driving the story forward. Let the new characters play a supporting role, adding to the legacy rather than overshadowing it. I'm sick of this new Hollywood thought process where main characters have to be young people. I just don't get it. I mean, I guess from a story standpoint, I understand the push, kind of, towards introducing new era of Ghostbusters, since the originals are technically getting pretty old at this point, but we need the original gang leading the charge, with the new members there to back them up, not the other way around. But anyways, I digress. Let's move on. Sigourney Weaver has got to make a comeback in an expanded role, and Rick Moranis, seeing him return as Janine's main squeeze would bring back that warmth and humor we loved from Ghostbusters 2, and would really help lock in that old school Ghostbusters feeling. And how about Slimer? Let's see him in more of those cat and mouse chase sequences with Trevor, but have him end up becoming a sort of friend and sidekick to both Trevor and the Ghostbusters team at large, sort of echoing his role in the real Ghostbusters cartoon. That would be awesome. Plus, bringing in the multicolored suits from the cartoon, at least for the original characters, would be an absolute treat. I don't know about you guys, but I'd be perfectly fine with the next film borrowing heavily from that cartoon, especially for the main villain, but we'll get to him in a moment. Going back to the Ghostbusters team at large, I want the dynamics between the original Ghostbusters and the new team to evolve greatly. Right now, they still kind of feel like strangers. By the end of Ghostbusters 5, they should feel like one big quirky family. And seriously, they better not even think about killing off any of the originals. I don't give a damn how old they are, don't do it. I'm also daydreaming of the Ecto-2 making a grand comeback, but with a twist. Imagine it revamped and powered up by Winston's team, cloaked in jet black paint job to embody the essence of a true hearse. The thought of both the iconic Ecto-1 and the newly revised, menacing at that, Ecto-2 roaring through the streets of NYC is nothing short of spectacular. The sight would be a perfect blend of nostalgia and modern prowess, thrilling fans and onlookers alike. In this envisioned version of Ghostbusters 5, I envision the narrative intricately weaving through the changing colors of fall, leading up to the movie's climactic crescendo on Halloween night itself, a time when the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. At the heart of this atmospheric journey, and this is the part where I talk about the film's main villain, would be the introduction of Sam Hain, or Samhain, the ghost of Halloween, an entity previously encountered only in the two Ghostbusters cartoons and comic books, but never in live action. Sam Hain, or Samhain, with his deep-rooted ties to the season and a chilling agenda to usher in an eternal night, embodies the essence of Halloween itself. His strategic evilness and the ability to manipulate time introduce a palpable sense of urgency to the storyline, while his command over legions of ghosts, albeit with notable exceptions like Slimer, adds layers of complexity and intrigue to the spectral dynamics the Ghostbusters must navigate. Sort of similar to the ice god of Frozen Kingdom, but dissimilar enough to be captivating. Bringing Sam Hain, or Samhain, to life in a live-action setting offers an unprecedented opportunity to delve into the rich folklore and traditions of Halloween, exploring things of darkness, the supernatural, and the eternal battle between light and shadow, which would totally be in Ray's wheelhouse and would give his character so much to do in this movie. And as the Ghostbusters face this formidable foe, they are not just combating a specter, but are entrenched in a battle to preserve the balance of the natural and supernatural worlds at large. This whole ordeal would also highlight the enduring appeal of the Ghostbusters as defenders of humanity against the encroaching darkness, making Sam Hain's transition from animation to live action a compelling and epic confrontation befitting the spirit of the season. Ghostbusters V, if greenlit, has the potential to be so much more than just another movie. It's an opportunity to celebrate everything we love about Ghostbusters, blending the old with the new in a way that feels both familiar and fresh. It's about creating a film that's a homecoming for not just the characters, but for us, the fans, who've been keeping the Ghostbusters spirit alive all these years. That is the dream. When we dive into the animated worlds of the real Ghostbusters and Extreme Ghostbusters, it's like opening a time capsule of cultural and technological shifts that influenced how stories were told to different generations. The real Ghostbusters hit the screens in the mid-1980s, seizing the momentum of the original film and expanding its universe into the living rooms of an eager young audience. Its blend of comedy, supernatural adventure, and the iconic proton packs captured imaginations, creating a fervent fan base that holds the series dear for its pioneering spirit and its role in defining Saturday morning cartoons for many. Fast forward to the late 1990s, and Extreme Ghostbusters enters the scene with a fresh coat of paint, aiming to resonate with a new generation while nodding respectfully to its predecessor. This iteration introduced a more diverse team and tackled themes that reflected the evolving societal landscape, attempting to blend the nostalgia of the original team with the new dynamics of the time. Both series, with their distinct flavors, leave a mark on the Ghostbusters legacy, appealing to different tastes and preferences. The real Ghostbusters is often celebrated for its faithfulness to the spirit of the original film and its role in cultivating a love for these characters and their adventures. Meanwhile, Extreme Ghostbusters is lauded for its efforts to update and diversify the franchise, making it relevant for a new era. As we look back on these two iterations of a beloved franchise, it sparks a conversation among fans and newcomers alike about which series resonates more with them. So I turn the question to you. Do you prefer the nostalgia and pioneering spirit of the real Ghostbusters, or does the 90s approach of Extreme Ghostbusters speak more to you? Let me know in the comments below.